Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll call the December 11th Select Board meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. I want to welcome everyone in the room. And just as a quick reminder for those of you who aren't at this end of the room, side conversations are very audible and distracting to us. So if you need to talk to each other, please pop out into the hallway to do so. Thank you very much. We will be accepting the agenda with a couple of exceptions. We're adding to the new business line the power outage during Stroll weekend, so that will come under new business. And I will be taking comment from the community members at that time. And a reminder, public comments will still be limited to 3 minutes, and you'll have a timer then.
Can I just note for the official record that the new business item is because that item wasn't...
Not reasonably expected within 48 hours.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And we will not be reviewing under Select Board reports and comments the letter of engagement for the Zoning Board of Appeals. That there was nothing ready for that. So other than that, we'll accept the agenda and move to announcements. Libby?
This meeting is being video and audio recorded, and Eric is going to take us through the applications that have been submitted for the current committee vacancies.
Thank you. So we have still some vacancies from our annual committee appointments. This is round 3. Capital Program Committee, we have 1 seat available and 1 applicant, Caroline Baltzer. I did note that she is a late applicant. The deadline was Friday and her application was received on Monday. I would recommend that you bypass your normal policy and allow that application to move forward for consideration, just because at this time in our renewal process, we don't get that many applications. So Council for Human Services, 1 seat available, 0 applicants, so that is still available. Council on Aging, 1 seat available, 0 applicants, that is still available. Cultural Council, 1 seat available, 0 applicants, that is still available. Real Estate Assessment Committee, 1 seat available and 1 applicant, Jesse Bell. And Zoning Board of Appeals, 1 seat available and 1 applicant, which is Lisa Botticelli. Lisa is a current alternate member, so if you do appoint her, we will then have to advertise the alternate seat that she vacates.
Thanks, Erica. Select Board announcements or comments? Seeing none, all quiet. We will move on to follow-up public comment questions from prior Select Board meetings. The only question that was asked was in reference to the public outreach, how we put out the request to send letters to the preservation, federal and state preservation officers with regard to South Coast Wind. And there is an answer to that up on the Select Board public comments page that's quite detailed. I won't read it tonight, but it is available up there under last week's date. And so that's it there. This is now, I will open public comment, and this is public comment for items not on the agenda tonight. Is there anyone who would like to speak on something not on the agenda?
Burton.
It's on.
Is Burton Balkine on behalf of the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy. We sent the Select Board members letters. I appreciate those that responded to us. And it was concerning the GEO2 project that you have a memorandum of understanding with. I'm not going to read the letter. I'm not going to go into all the details, but as you know, the project has been not maintained, not monitored for well over a year, and I think it's getting close to 2 years that no significant mitigation sand has been put on there. Reason why I'm getting up now, because we at the Coastal Conservancy are at a wit's end. We're on a public beach, and it's being degraded and harmed by the fact that there's a wall there, and it's not being mitigated properly. The downdrift beaches, our neighbors on the public beach, are also being harmed it's tough to watch this happen over the course of a couple years and not have anything being done. I've got in front of you, the board, many times for this, and we don't know what else to do other than really ask and beg you to do something that will, I don't want the houses to go into the water. I don't want to lose the road. I just want to preserve the beaches there too. So if there's anything you can do, if you can ask your co-applicant in front of the Conservation Commission to put some sand on it, or if there's anything the town can do. We're coming into our new storm season, and it's getting worse out there, and I'm just afraid that we're not putting the public interest in our public beach first. So that's my ask. Thank you for listening to me.
Thanks, Bruce. Anyone else want to speak in public comment for items not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none and no hands up online. We'll move on to new business. So we've added this item tonight to talk about the power outage and the impact on the community, and we have representatives from National Grid here online. If you, whoever's here for that, could come on camera now. And I think where we're going to start is I'm going to have Peter Burke, who represents the Nantucket Chamber of Commerce, make a statement that he's prepared with regard to the Chamber's experience as the sponsors of Christmas Stroll. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you very much. Peter Burke, Executive Director for the Nantucket Island Chamber of Commerce. I'll start by saying that many of our activities are member-specific, and we use our membership Rolodex to provide baseline information. Any activities we are taking regarding power-affected businesses at Stroll will be to the benefit of all of those businesses and not limited to members, as Stroll is an island-wide celebration. While I make these remarks as my own, the affected businesses are approaching this as one united front, knowing there is strength as a group. Since power was restored Sunday afternoon, we have been working on 3 major initiatives: quantifying the economic impact of the outage, using that information to explore various financial supports for affected businesses, and lastly, by asking for any current action plans to be refreshed to prevent and mitigate the impacts of future issues. In our effort to quantify the impact, we sent out a survey focusing on lost revenues to the businesses and dollars lost to the revenues, to the employees, excuse me. In the affected area, we have estimated 208 chamber member businesses across all business sectors, restaurants, hotels, et cetera. That would include any streets we knew that lost power for any amount of time, recognizing that power was partially restored throughout the weekend, but remained off for some, forcing some businesses to close for the 2 busiest days of the year. We have collected, as of 10 a.m. this morning, about 50 responses, reporting $1.3 million in lost revenue and another 130,000 estimated lost employee gratuities. By sector, of the 16 responding restaurants, the total revenue was about $766,000, the average approximately $45,000, with a range of $5,000 to multiple businesses reporting over $100,000 in losses. The responding 30 retailers and 4 services, spas, salons, et cetera, tallied about $556,000 in lost revenue, averaging $16,000, and had a range of $500 to $75,000. I will remind everyone here that we estimate 200 businesses may have experienced partial outage. We've heard from 50 businesses representing $1.3 million in lost revenue. I would expect actual numbers to be higher. As one of the 16 regional tourism councils under the Mass Office of Travel and Tourism, we are constantly looking to drive shoulder season events. This immediate weekend impact of the power outage is not limited to these 30 hours. It will continue to ripple throughout the winter and into the spring, and the loss of confidence in our infrastructure was felt by our visiting guests as well as our local patrons. Regarding financial help, firstly, we are asking any affected business to track everything. Track the employees you had on your shifts or had scheduled to be on your shifts, track inventory losses, revenue losses, et cetera. The more info you have, the better. Regarding insurances, we also encourage affected businesses to file any claims with insurance companies you carry. We have heard that from some business owners and industry professionals that many insurances may not cover losses due to the length and nature of the outage, but having a record of filing a claim is really important for any potential future financial support. We have also heard and seen the claim denials some businesses have received from National Grid. Knowing that many of these claims were filed within hours of power being restored and affording National Grid additional time to develop a customized response, I'm standing here today asking the National Grid strongly consider revisiting those claims. We are not naive, and we understand the full revenues of all affected businesses will not be realized by any single insurance company or response. But if not now, then what conditions would need to exist for National Grid to pay claims? Additionally, there's been a heartwarming and outpouring of support from other businesses and private individuals. I will plainly say I do not have firsthand experience orchestrating a relief fund, but I have quickly understood some of its complexities. Firstly, this is unlike traditional GoFundMes or other initiatives with a single or few recipients, as we're looking at 200 businesses and upwards of 1,000 individuals that have experienced some sort of loss of dollars. How am I supposed to weigh the support to a jewelry store versus the support of a clothing retailer versus a line cook, et cetera? Also, unlike a natural disaster, the cause of this outage did not automatically trigger state or federal support. We are still exploring state options for available support and have heard from the governor's office and Senator Sear office and have had initial conversations, but just no resulting concrete efforts yet. I also know the team at 4Now has collected dollars, and we have had countless offers from other individuals and businesses. Hotels have offered to give small staycations or space for relief effort events. The Inky has put together advertising comps. Visitor Service offered their support, Fairgrounds, The Box, the Rotary Club, and many more. And of course, our team is doing our best to promote the businesses through our normal channels. I have linked the team at 4Now with a few other people in the community and on our board to form a small action committee to help, because I just need the help on how to form this type of relief fund. So we have requests out for structural support from other tourism regions and from the state, and we'll update the community as soon as we know the right way to do this. I want to keep the momentum going. We also need to be realistic and careful that whatever donation system is developed meets legal requirements, tax requirements, accounting, and is equitable to any that may draw from it. Lastly, we're requesting a refreshed action plan. I understand that a lack of power quickly became a public safety issue, and I want to reiterate my appreciation for the Nantucket Police and Fire Departments, Visitor Services, and Town Communications, and our local National Grid service crews for their response in keeping our outage area as safe as possible. However, there does seem to be room for improvement regarding communication, especially to accounts from National Grid as the situation was unfolding. Making suggestions to National Grid and the town on how to respond to outages is a bit like me walking into Nantucket Cottage Hospital and performing surgery on myself, but I'm going to do it anyway. My request from the town, perhaps the Energy Office, in conjunction with National Grid, is for a backdated service report on the repaired line, planned inspections of other aging lines and their current conditions, and any scheduled improvement plans. It is not our intent to create additional work. It is a formal request in our attempt to understand what happened and to prevent future issues. We implore National Grid to review any line maintenance policies, keep any necessary equipment required to service our island on the island, and work with our town officials on any revamped response plans. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete. I'm going to follow up with a little update on town administration and the select board, me on behalf of the select board's communication with varying entities. I've had conversations with the governor's office, with Senator Markey's office, with Senator Sear himself. And the State Department of Public Utilities did issue a letter to National Grid late this afternoon, and they have declared that this event constituted a service interruption, which begins an inquiry and review process by DPU of the incident. So the state is stepping in to try to bring their authority to bear on the situation as well. I know everyone is looking for answers, and some of these answers, a lot of these answers aren't going to come, in days, but we are working on it, and I want to assure you that we are. And now I would like to ask the representatives from National Grid to give us a summary of what your understanding of what happened, the timeline for restoration of power, and then to begin a conversation about what next to prevent situations like this from happening again. So I don't know, Sean, are you going to go first?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Sean Vasher. I'm the Vice President for New England Electric with National Grid. I've assembled my team here to discuss what went transpired last weekend. I think it's also important to note we are in the middle of a storm event right now. The state level preparation call is immediately on the back end of this. So we have a hard stop at 6:30, and many of the people on this call are part of that incident command structure, including myself. But we recognize it's important to you. You rely heavily on the power that we provide. So if we run out of time, we're happy to come back. We know that you guys have questions, and hopefully we can provide those answers. With respect to the storm, if you're curious, you guys are at 0 outages right now. The mainland is climbing to about 4,000. We've dispatched additional crews to the island in the past couple days. That includes tree crews. So you may have seen tree crews out there doing some trimming yesterday, and that was to prepare for anything that presented a risk in the 60, 65 plus mile per hour winds. So we are committed to restoring as quickly possible and resiliency and reliability for the island. What happened last weekend, we do not describe that as business as usual for us by any means, and we apologize. With me, I have Jeff Merritt. He's my head of field operations, and he oversaw the emergency response the past weekend. I also have the local leadership in Joe Torme and Steve Holdgate, and then also Joe Carroll, who's our local community liaison that you probably engage with on a more regular basis. Before I turn it over to Jeff so we can walk through what transpired last weekend, what I wanted to say was when we go through restoration, it's not something that we take lightly. We try to do it as quickly and safely as possible. And I'm proud of what the crews had to do. In light of that, I'm very thankful for what the town also had to do. It's not lost on me what the ferry service had to pull in for support, what local public works did to help us dewater manholes. Your patience with us is one thing, but your grace and lending a hand is another. And I sort of lose words at that point when I realize what you guys did to help us with that restoration effort. So thank you is all I can really say. Jeff, I'll turn it over to you for a few minutes if you can walk through what happened starting with Saturday.
Of course, so good evening, everybody. I'm Jeff Merritt. I'm the head of operations for National Grid New England, and I have a long history in electric operations in the South Shore of Mass and, of course, Nantucket. I've been around long enough to have worked in Nantucket many, many times through the years, various projects, and of course, storm response multiple times. So I did hear the question, and I would like to take a second and try to walk us through a bit of a timeline, an operational view of what the outage over the weekend, and just step it through how we responded as a group for that outage, right? So, and just to be clear, as a reference point for everybody, the cable that we're talking about in this case is literally about 2 inches in diameter, and there's 3 of them twisted together that fit inside of a piece of 4-inch conduit. So this is large cable that takes, large equipment, big equipment, special skills, all that kind of stuff to actually remove the old cable, put the new cable in, and so just it's a concept thing how big this equipment really is. So our first call came in at 10:18 on Saturday morning. So Steve Holgate, Joe Torme, they live on the island, immediately called in a local crew to determine what caused the outage, and also at that point how to minimize the outage, how to get it to the smallest possible area. So initial was 1,443 customers, mostly in the downtown area, and they were suspecting a problem with the underground system. At that point, you don't know if it's the cable itself or some other device. And then we worked with our control center to isolate that outage and then restore the power. When we did that around 1 o'clock, we were able to restore about 1,000, say 1,200 customers. And so at that same time, the way they isolate that is by pulling some fuses. These are 13,000 volt fuses that isolate the area that had the trouble. So doing that, again, with special tools, that kind of stuff, that got us down to 272 customers. But unfortunately, that area still without power was largely the downtown area, which we know. And even at that point, we didn't necessarily know if it was truly a cable fault or some other piece of equipment, again, attached to that system. We're walking through the steps here of how we determine what the real problem is and how we respond to this. So not knowing that, in a parallel path, we start to secure some specialized underground crews and substation crews from the mainland to Nantucket, come over on the ferry at a ferry time of 8 o'clock. And when they come over, they bring with them several vehicles, large vehicles, right, to trailer the wire. I mean, these are big reels. These are 6-foot reels, 6 foot in diameter. And there's a special vehicle that they bring that actually pulls the wire into the conduits and pulls the old wire out. And at that point, we were really planning on pulling one section of cable. And as we learned when it went on, we decided to actually install 2 sections for good reason. And not only was it the wire, but the terminating devices, that, again, they call them T-body connectors, those had to be replaced as well. So in that time, we're getting the additional crews called in from the mainland, getting them ready for the ferry. We called in the additional electric crews from Nantucket, the local crews. And once they arrived, they started using the underground test equipment on island to determine if first the cable was faulted or not, and second to locate the actual fault, which we know with hindsight now is an actual fault. So the conductor length in this case is about 1,500 feet. So 1,500 feet of pipe, 1,500 feet of wire. That's the distance we have to check to see where the problem might be. So to locate the fault, we put this locator on the cable, and then we walk the cable route to see if we can hear an audio indication of where the fault is. We also get on that same piece of equipment a radar view. And that radar view will show a bit of a blip of where the possible fault is, so we can limit how far we have to walk and determine where the problem might be. It gives you some guidance in that 1,500-foot run where it might be. So honestly, all of that worked very well, and the crews responded excellent. And using the equipment on island, they're used to using this equipment. They use it in the underground areas, the residential underground areas, all the time. And it's really indicative of the developments across Nantucket. You see them in most of the residential areas. Again, they use it all the time. So at around 8 o'clock at night, the fault was located in manhole 36 at South Water Street. But still, we needed to determine the extent of the fault because the manholes, of course, are full of water. So we pumped the manholes down, and Sean mentioned this, the Nantucket helped us with the vac truck to actually clean those manholes out. So truly, thank you for that. That's a huge help. That's a big piece of equipment, very helpful. And at that point, it was determined that the fault was just inside of the conduit. So there's no way to put a repair splice on that cable. It's stuck inside the pipe, it's too far in. So we knew at that point we need to pull out the old cable, install the new cable. And all of this testing in locating was done with local, on-island crews. At around 11 o'clock at night, the mainland crews showed up, arrived on site, and it was determined that replacing 2 sections of cable would actually work out much quicker than replacing the one. And the reason for that was the 2 holes on the adjacent sides actually had a lot more room for these pieces of terminating equipment, these T-bodies. So the crews started heading in that direction. The crews that came from the mainland carried all the wire and materials, all the kind of stuff that they would need. And just as a reminder, there's no way to replace one faulted wire. You actually have to pull out all 3 and install 3 new. You can't pull the one out and just put one in. And I mentioned it, but in addition, 9 of those terminating devices would need to be replaced as well. So again, those are those connectors that connect the existing wire to the new wire that we were going to be pulling in. Around midnight, knowing this was going to take some time, we started securing 5 additional workers from the mainland, from Malden, Somerset, and Brockton, to be on a ferry, one at 5:30 in the morning, Sunday morning, and the other at 7:30. And in the meantime, the crew that had just arrived on island would start pulling out the old cables, start installing the new cables, so that when those fresh crews got on island, they would be ready to make up the terminations and put the new cable in service and restore the customers. So 11:30 at night, we were able to further isolate the area down and get down to 236 customers out instead of the 272, I think it was. And by 5:30 in the morning, the faulted cable was pulled out. And by 7:30, the new cable was pulled in, so that when the new crew came, the fresh crew came, they were ready to start splicing. At 8:30, the fresh crews arrived, and they immediately went to the site and started splicing the terminations. At 11:30 in the morning, the new splices were all made up, the manholes were closed up, and making them ready for service. But at this point, there is phase testing and resistance testing and like a cable testing that needs to happen before we re-energize these cables at 13,000 volts. This is for the safety of the workers, the safety of our customers, and quite honestly, we don't want to damage the equipment either. So we test first. And this ounce of prevention sometimes prevents a lot of troubles in a big world of hurt. So we go through this testing always, and the testing proves that there are no other issues with the existing cables or with the new cables that we put in, and that the two systems, the new one and the old one, align properly, like wire to wire, they're connected correctly. So all of that testing was done right around 12:30 on Sunday afternoon. And then at 12:30, we started the switching, reinstalled the fuses to the section of cable that had been isolated before. And then around 1:30, we re-energized the remaining 262 customers. So I know that was a lot. I'll stop there, but I hope it gives a little bit of context on how we responded once we get that first call at 10:18 in the morning, and what happened hour after hour. It seems forever. It's like it drags on forever. And but there are a lot of steps that have to happen to install equipment like that and do it safely. And of course, I'm an ops guy. We want to get the lights back on as soon as possible. And so anyway, I hope that helps. I'll turn it back to you, Sean, if that's correct.
Thank you.
Of course.
Did we lose Sean?
I think we, sorry, Joe Carroll, I think we just lost Sean, but he's coming right back on now. So I think if we could wait a minute for him to rejoin.
Yep.
And then just conclude with his and then move on. Would that be okay, Madam Chair?
Yeah, have you heard, is anyone in touch with him?
Yes, he just texted me. He said he's rejoining right now.
Okay,
As his
there he is.
screen.
Okay. Okay. Oh, we lost him again.
Well, that's going on. Bill, let's see if Bill Malay is on.
Oh, Sean's back.
Oh, Sean's back. Okay.
Mr. Merritt turned it back to you.
Nope, no problem. Lost service there for a second. Apologies. Thank you, Jeff, for walking us through that. So, some questions had come up earlier, and it was mentioned by the chair of the Chamber of Commerce, and I think this will help respond to a bit of that. The next steps, now that we've got the lights back on. So, before we jump into maybe some history here, these lines used to be overhead, and then there was an effort in the 1980s to get them underground. Overhead restoration goes much quicker than an underground effort. That takes a bit of time. But underground cables are much more resilient. You can go decades and never have an outage. They're not exposed to things like prelims, motor vehicle accidents, animal context. It's very, very different animal altogether. When we design the system, we try to build it out in a way that is as redundant as possible. And what I mean by that is, if something were to break a source of electricity somewhere, we hope to feed it in another way. All right. And that's why you go from 1,400 customers out down to 230, 240 very quickly, because we can start using that redundancy to serve. We have a solution in flight for the downtown area. In fact, we've been working with the town already to make sure that we have a scope of work that's palatable and acceptable to the island. That's coming to full permitting next month. If approved, we'll go into construction March, April timeframe. We'll complete the work in the spring and fall construction periods. So by the end of calendar year 2025, you will have that redundant service downtown. So if something were to happen, a motor vehicle accident, a fault in animal conduct somewhere, we can quickly restore that and get downtown going again, which is a capability you don't have today. So, what I'd like to do with the remainder of the time is open it up to any questions.
Okay, great. I just want to ask you, was that the engineering for that redundancy system in place before this incident?
Yes, it's fully designed. Yes.
Okay, okay. So we knew it was needed.
It's coincidental, if anything, that this happened, but that plan was already in motion.
Okay, thank you.
Just a,
Questions from the
before
board,
we,
Matt?
yeah, before we open to the public, why was it faulty? Like, how does it, how does it not work? Yeah, how
Yeah.
does it degrade? Does it degrade, or what would have caused that? And is it likely that there are other wires put in at the same time that are under
Yeah.
that same pressure?
So there's instances where we can tell that immediately when something happens. Sometimes this is really obvious because you'll see a vehicle that hit a pole, or you'll see an animal next to it, so you know it's an animal contact. This is much more challenging. There was no obvious signs of anything. So what we've done is when we cut those two sections of cable out, they go off to our lab and we do testing on them. So it's sort of like an autopsy that's going to reveal, hopefully, something that happened, whether it's manufacturer, our own installation processes, if there are environmental conditions that took effect. That analysis will take a couple weeks. So again, knowing that we've got about 30 minutes left, if we need more time, hopefully we can come back and talk about that as well. And if we're able not to discover anything with our own internal analysis, there's third-party companies that we can also send these sections of cable out to see if they can discover anything.
And just as a follow-up, I presume knowing what happened will help you to figure out how to maintain and prevent and monitor?
That's right. So we have about $8 million known in investment in the next 5-year work plan for Nantucket. That's likely to grow. Some of those estimates are very early. If we find out something through that analysis in these two sections that we don't have the work plan right, and there's additional stuff that has to happen, we revalidate the scope of work for the island. It would lead to additional infrastructure solutions potentially. So we don't have any indication that the solution we have in flight right now is the wrong one. But if we were to discover something, then yes, we would take action on that immediately.
Okay. So just as a point of clarification, the team that is here tonight with you guys, I know there's going to be questions about financial mitigation from the community. Are you prepared to answer anything with regard to that? Or should I encourage folks to focus on technical questions and that kind?
So
Yeah, so hi, this is Bill Malee. I'm a Chief Customer Officer at National Grid. I can certainly speak to the claims process and some of those processes we have. And then we have Sean and Jeff, who obviously are the experts on the technical aspects as well.
Okay, terrific. Is there anything you want to say initially before we take questions regarding that process, or let people know where to go, how to contact you, et cetera?
Yeah, thank you. First, I just want to recognize that a number of customers have been impacted by the outage, as Sean mentioned up front, and that the timing was really unfortunate, and we recognize that. As I mentioned, we do have a claims process. The way that works is once we receive the claim, a representative is assigned, and then if they need more information about the specific claim, they'll reach out directly to the customer who filed the claim. We investigate those claims on a case-by-case basis, so each case one by one individually, because as you can imagine, with claims, every scenario can be a little bit different. Every customer may have been impacted slightly differently, and so those are reviewed individually, one by one, and then ultimately the representative will communicate back directly with the customer on the outcome based on the information that they have around the claim and that was submitted around the claim.
Okay.
You can. I'm just going to say that. Sorry, one more thing is the easiest way to process it and the fastest way to get the claim processed is through our website online. We do have other methods if that's not preferred, but that is by far the quickest way to work through the process.
Okay. And is that available on the general website, or does the customer have to have a login account established?
No, it's on our general website.
Okay, terrific. Matt?
And what is the basis for approving or denying a claim?
So every scenario is different. We do have some criteria. Typically, a claim does have a pretty high threshold to meet the claim standard, and that's defined in our tariffs that we operate. But each individual claim is so unique, we really have to look at it case by case to determine whether or not it would be approved or denied.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board? Okay, if anyone from the public would like to comment or speak or ask a question at this time, you're welcome to come to the microphone. And we're going to use the 3-minute timer. And Pete?
Yeah, I'm just, obviously, there's a lot of representatives here from local businesses that, again, we're not trying to stifle anyone from coming to the mic, but it's easier if one person kind of collects the thoughts. You know, the claims section of that, of course, is frustrating because some people have filed claims. So if there's an understanding or commitment that, you know, we need the human intervention. We can't have like the robot claim come back and say, hey, it's denied because it doesn't meet these parameters. This is a very specific situation. And if the cause of the fault hasn't been determined yet, how can the claim be rejected or accepted if the forensic work on the wire hasn't been done yet? So I would just love National Grid to commit to responding to their members that were in the affected outage by saying, hey, we have a timeline on these claims, or wait for us to get all of our information, being National Grid. So that's one thing. The other is, as part of that action plan, not only in a response to the repairs, which again, Torme and his crew did an amazing job. It's not, you know, those guys live and work in our community. It was a long Saturday night in the cold working, and I know crews came in from off island. The communication during the outage to our businesses was a real challenge, and it was a really hard process, because if you're being told it's going to be a few hours, you make different decisions, what you do with the food in your freezer versus your restaurant, or what you tell customers. And I know no one has a crystal ball, but figuring out a different way or a better way or a more accurate way to respond to business customers in the middle of a crisis outage, and I use the term crisis, you know, it was for that business timeline. It also, I don't know if there's a cell phone booster in one of the church towers. I think there is, but cell phone service was pretty rotten when the power went out. And I don't know if that was just for usage or just because the power was low on that booster. But if there's an infrastructure change that could also lead to a better change in communication timeline, et cetera, we certainly are not expecting all these answers to happen tonight. But a constant communication and a pledge for future communication and updates on, hey, here's where we are in that forensic, investigation on what actually happened to the wire. Hey, here's our new plan to Matt Fee's point, understanding if there's wires of similar age and condition, well, let's not wait till they fail to repair them. Some preventative action plan would go a long way to mitigating the nerves. Because when you say April, I think daffodil, and that makes me worried. So just updating a constant stream of communication. I would love National Grid to appoint a point person to keep the select board and therefore the community updated. I'm happy to be a conduit of information to the business community, but more communication, the better. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll
Madam
just
Chair, if I could respond, Joe Carroll.
Sure, go ahead.
I'll take Peter's recommendation on that, and myself and Bill Sioka will be working with him to work through some additional measures for the communication plan.
Yeah, I find it interesting when there's a storm coming, texts blow up on my phone. So from you guys, so that the system exists. I know it exists as a customer. So,
I agree.
And I think we don't know. Periodically, we don't know. No new information rather than an information void is always it's not reassuring, but it's helpful to people know that you're on it and you know that we're out there. Just as an example. Erica, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say that Bill Sioka was in touch with me over the weekend, and I tried to relay all the information to town administration. So.
Yeah, and our communications department really stepped up and did their best under the circumstances, but people receive communications in very disparate ways now in our society. And so for us to reach a broad audience, if they're not subscribed to notifications from the town or they're not following us on social media, they're not getting that information that we put out. But these are your customers, and I guess I just want to reiterate that point. You have a direct line of communication to them that could be utilized more effectively in a circumstance like this. So in
Totally
addition,
agreement. And again, we will sit down with Peter. I know he's been able to interact with a number of businesses in the area, and we can try to use that as a tool to also expand even further. So,
okay. Okay, anyone else wish to come to the mic and speak at this point? I appreciate you're all here in support of one another.
Would it be okay if I respond to Mr. Burke's last part of his question?
Absolutely, go ahead.
So it's important to note that we're not waiting for the cable to fail before we enact a solution for it. That the integrity of the cable isn't something that we're questioning. I can give some history on how that cable's performed over time. The solution that we're putting in place resolves a redundancy/resiliency issue. So if for some reason something were to happen, we can restore customers very quickly. That's the purpose of the solution. It's not because the cable is getting older and we think that it's going to continue to have these issues. In fact, these underground cables are extremely reliable. Nantucket as a whole, its reliability is some of the best in the country. This cable in particular, over the past 24 years, we started monitoring performance of all of our different cables in the system and seeing every time there's an outage. We document all of this. We know every time it happened, how long it lasted, how many customers are impacted, and we always try to identify what the root cause is, which obviously is still pending on this one. But since we started tracking that in 2000, there's only been 7 outages on this cable. The one that happened this weekend is the only time this section has had an issue. Of those 7, some of them are things like a dump truck. So some of this cable is underground. Some of it turns into an overhead line after a while. A dump truck impacted the lines, and the driver was trapped. The fire department calls us to de-energize it. Customers were out for about 7 minutes. So there's things like that. And then there are other things where could be an animal contact, but a fuse opens, a fuse closes back in, it's quick, and we can restore that. We can fix those things issue. This obviously was the longest one that we've had, about 27 hours. But typically in those 7 over the 24 years, we can explain them. We understand what the integrity of the cable is, and they last anywhere between minutes and just a couple of hours. And even within those couple hours, we have the redundancy to restore people even quicker. So again, the solution is to add a contingency if something like this were to ever happen again. There's other scope in there as well that will hopefully improve things as well. So we don't have to rely on, well, we'll just hope that it lasts for another 20 years. We're going to redistribute some of the electricity as well. But again, we weren't responding all of a sudden because we felt like we had an asset condition issue. That's not the case. And until that investigation is complete, we're not ready to say that it is the case today based on the history and how it's performed up until this weekend.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the room? Do we have any hands up online? No, okay. Well, I appreciate your coming out. We look forward to consistent and ongoing communication, and we hope that you will take Peter's request to heart that robot responses to claims, that there's some other level of response to customer claims beyond automated stuff that we've seen so far as well. As I just want to reinforce that point. Erica?
I just want to make one point to Peter's comment about Daffodil and how that makes you nervous. I will say that this upcoming project has been discussed with National Grid and Town Administration, and when we work with the contractors to do the work, I routinely put blackout dates in the permits. So obviously Friday through Sunday of Daffodil Weekend would be a blackout date. And this work that's being proposed is not going to be that impactful, which is good. So hopefully that quells your fears about that.
Thanks, Erica.
I've got one other comment. I've run a year-round bakery for 35 years. I've run a seasonal bakery almost 50 now. I started when I was a kid. This was huge. I will say, since we've got a cable from off island, it has been a lot better. And I know that because when the power goes out, we lose hundreds of loaves of bread. We have to run the ovens by hand. You know, it happened, we lost an hour, hour and a half this summer, and it was thousands of dollars. But overall, like the last 20 years compared to the previous, last 25 or 30, compared to the previous 20, it's night and day. And whenever that happens, I think, oh, I need a generator. I should have had a generator. I've only thought that once or twice in the last, 10, 15, 20 years. I thought this summer at one point. But prior to that, I was thinking that every other week, back when we have had some improvements. I think there's a long way to go probably, and it's hard to hear that now, but there have been improvements and it's different than it was. So, and that doesn't help any of us for this weekend. I know they have a lot to, to still work on, and I'm glad they're doing it. But I think a little perspective, I think, is important too. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for coming. And thanks, National Grid. And we got you out 15 minutes ahead of schedule. So
Thank you.
looking forward to ongoing communications. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, next on the agenda is approval of minutes, warrants, and pending contracts. Any comments, questions, or a motion?
So moved.
Move acceptance of all three. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Okay, we'll take 1 second to clear the room, and then we'll go on to citizen departmental committee requests and reports. First up is the Housing Office. Christie? The first item is request for approval and execution of joinder to global participation agreement for the town's participation in MassDOC's program for affordable housing projects. That is a mouthful. Please explain.
Yes, so we're requesting approval for the town of Nantucket to participate in the MassDOCs program. What this program does is it provides standardized forms and loan documents for closing on state and federally funded affordable housing projects. And the specific reason that we are requesting the approval now is the timeline of starting the closing process for the Tacoma Green project, which is low-income housing tax credits or a LIHTC deal, and the approval of the MassDOCs program and being able to enter as one of their participants will streamline this process. I also have Vicki Marsh here if there's any questions from the board about this program or what this would mean for the town to be a participant.
Any questions from the board?
Madam Chair, just quickly note that I looked this program up today. I'd actually never heard of it, and Boston, Provincetown, looks like 60, 70 plus communities, cities and towns in the Commonwealth participate in this. It seems pretty standard, straightforward.
Feels like a time saver, so.
I'll move approval.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Okay, on to item B, request for authorization to submit housing production plan, certification request letter to EOHLC, Housing and Livable Communities for Safe Harbor.
Yes. So this request is to authorize the chair to sign the letter requesting that the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities certify our housing production plan for 1 year of Safe Harbor. Before moving on to the details of the letter, I just wanted to review some of the materials that are inside of your packet. Eric, are you able to share the document titled Units Created Since 2019?
Yeah, just give me 1 sec.
Thank you. Thank you. So in just talking, I wanted to point out the progress that has been made by the Affordable Housing Trust over the last several years in adding deed restricted units to our inventory. So in total, if you scroll down slightly, I know there's a lot of words on here, a lot of projects. That's the good news. There's been a lot of projects. Since 2019, we've been able to create 178 units, and we have currently 134 in the pipeline. And all of this is because of the amount of town meeting funding that has been approved by the voters and their commitment to getting us towards our 10% goal. We also have 35 units that are possible if those projects come to fruition that will add additional units. One thing I wanted to note is that of the 178 units that are deed restricted and where town meeting funds were utilized, 30 of them are under construction, but the remaining of the number of units are all rented or homeowner occupied. And as we like to say, that's a lot of heads in beds. Coming up in 2025 and 2026, that's the second column of units under construction. A lot of those units are part of the Tacoma Green project, and then the RFP for town vacant land. So I know sometimes there's questions about why units haven't been created on town land yet, and it's part of our strategic plan, which I'll dive into in a minute, but it's all part of trying to line up the creation of these units to keep us in safe harbor. So in total, we've been able to create 347 units of deed restricted housing, both rental and home ownership, through the funds appropriated at town meeting. Of these, 335 are on our SHI list, which just really indicates we've been focusing a lot on adding to our SHI list, and the goal is in the future to start to look at how to add units for that missing middle. So how do you get between that 100% and 240% of AMI? And it's all a balancing act while we're trying to stay in safe harbor while adding these units and expanding options for our community. And Erica, can you
I
just...
have while you're still there, Christy, it's Matt. The total project cost, what is that made up of? Is that money, the total we've put in for that many units, or is that the total of that whole thing?
That's the total that the town has contributed to the project to date.
Yeah. So it's a little over 200,000 per unit when you divide.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
And then the
Sorry,
next...
Christy, which one?
The next document, yes, this is kind of what I call our strategic plan for trying to reach our 10% goal under Chapter 40B. So as everybody's aware, the state mandated through the Chapter 40B law in the late 70s that 10% of our housing stock, year-round housing stock, needed to be deed restricted to affordable levels. When we're not meeting that 10%, we are basically exposed to unfriendly 40Bs being able to come in and apply for a special permit through the ZBA. Since 2019, it's been a big goal of the community to stay in safe harbor. And so this is a document that we've had basically since 2019 that we keep adding years to and projects to help us see the light at the end of the tunnel. So we've seen this a couple times in my reports to the board, but I just wanted to add that in 2024, we were able to add 62 units to our SHI list. So at the end of this year, we'll be at 6.5% towards our 10% goal. Next year, in 2025 and 2026, we have a combination of projects that could lead to a potential of 112 units in 2025 and 103 units in 2026. So you can see there's a substantial amount of progress, and it just shows kind of the timeline of how things progress through the housing department. So the purchase of land took time to develop RFPs, to take time to get the development going, but it all lines up to keeping us in safe harbor and getting us to that 10% goal. So I just wanted to present both of those just to have a chance to talk to the community about the progress that we've made and the plan that we have for maintaining safe harbor. So to circle back to the request that's in front of you tonight, we were able to add 62 units to our SHI list, but unfortunately the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities only approved 52 as being eligible for safe harbor. So this restricts the time period of safe harbor that we can apply for. So we had hoped to be able to apply for 2 years, and instead we're able to apply for 1. I think what's really important to note is that that spreadsheet just went through the current timeline of projects, and there are several projects in 2025 that will help us extend this past the expiration date. So we do have projects in the works, and the Housing Office is committed with the Affordable Housing Trust to making sure that we don't have a lapse in safe harbor in the future as we work towards getting to that 10% goal.
Christy, why did they not recognize 10 of those units?
So the legislation and their regulations are very strict on the timeline of when things are either approved or a building permit is pulled. And 10 of those units were pulled before January 1st. And this is something that we were kind of monitoring and weren't aware of until we submitted for application. And we thought that that was a foundation permit, and it was a building permit. So it was unfortunate that we're able to reach that 62 units, but like I said, we do have other projects lined up.
I'd just like to comment, it's an interesting law because it's encouraging the development of affordable housing and attainable housing for the community, but the parameters actually disincentivize doing it rapidly or doing it in spurts. The way it's set up is you have to do it stepwise, X number of units a year till you get to 10% to stay in safe harbor. And it actually de-incentivizes doing it rapidly if you could do 100 units this year and then do none for a couple of years. So I'd love the community to understand why it feels sometimes like it's taking forever. That's intentional in some ways because of the challenges of Chapter 40B. And we are constantly in dialogue with our state reps around the impacts of Chapter 40B and to our unique. We haven't gotten a lot of traction up at the State House on this issue, but I'm hopeful maybe through the seasonal communities designation, there may be some liberties granted to seasonal communities under Chapter 40B, but we'll see, because that's just in development. So, Matt?
Madam Chair,
Oh,
I
Malcolm?
mean, there are other communities concerned about this. I mean, it's to lose 10 sounds like a real tragedy. I mean, that's a lot.
They still count, they just don't count towards safe harbor. They count on our subsidized housing inventory, they count toward our 10%, they just don't count on our safe harbor process. And this is a matter of a set of rules that are applied strictly because agencies don't want to be making judgment calls. It's why there are rules, because people try to skirt around rules. And so it's as frustrating as it is. I just want the community to know that our housing department and all of the folks that we use as consultants are working so hard to comply with this complicated law. And we've been really successful, as Christy pointed out. So Matt, did you want to add
Yeah,
anything?
just a thought is, I know that when we make, we're making contributions, we're helping with some of this, we will tell when we want it done by a certain date, like we did with Tacoma. Can you have it done this year? Can you have it done by this? I wonder if there's a way to tighten up to ensure that something like that doesn't happen in the future. Is there a way to track that or to put that into our document into our documents and make that, this is just a suggestion for Christy to think about. Do we make the date the money we're contributing, can we make that contingent on them pulling it at the right time?
Go ahead, Tom. You want to?
I think you're probably going to say what I was going to say is that, Matt, projects like Tacoma Green, that took forever to figure out, and that was one of the contingencies on that, because we would have lost that amount of units. And I know that's something the trust has been working very hard on, keeping an eye on exactly that, because this is a delicate dance. I completely agree with everything that Brooke said. Thought that was right on. 40B works in many places in the Commonwealth. Nantucket has several uniquenesses where, and because we are a seasonal community and many other reasons, which we don't have time for tonight, that there are parts of it that just don't work for us. But we are subject, and we have to, like you said, we have to follow those rules.
Christy, did you want to add anything?
Yes, I just wanted to add that when we came across this, it was unfortunately just a few weeks ago, so we didn't have time to try to expedite another project or have something else available by the end of the year. But what we've done is a lot of advocacy work and a lot of meetings with the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, and great contact with Julian Sears' office and Sarah Peak's office. And one of kind of the big takeaways from all those conversations was, unfortunately, they couldn't give us a waiver as I was requesting, but there's 351 municipalities in the Commonwealth, and only about 10 of them have any sort of safe harbor. And Nantucket's been on that list consistently since 2019 and will continue to be on that list in 2025. And that's something that no other community has been able to achieve. So they recognize how much work we're doing, how our voters have appropriated funds, the commitment that we have. We've gone from 1.8% towards our 10% goal to 6.5%, and that goal increased in 2020. So they really recognized everything that we're doing. It is just a really tough law to comply with. But as Brooke said, I'm really hopeful that our advocacy efforts can make some sort of change at the state level. And when Secretary Augustus, who's the Secretary of Housing, visited the island in October, he was really impacted by everything Nantucket's doing and what our housing crisis looks like. And he's been bringing that story across the state. And so I'm hopeful that we can continue to advocate for some sort of exemption for seasonal communities or something that helps Nantucket.
Penny, did you want to add something?
Yes, thank you. Penny Dye, I'm the vice chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. Brian Sullivan, who's the chair, could not be here tonight. Just to follow up on something that Christy mentioned, when Secretary Augustus was here, he was so impressed with the amount of work that this community has been doing towards affordable housing, including the commitment to funding. And there was a subsequent conference a day or two later, and he was holding Nantucket up as an example for the rest of the state in terms of the efforts that we've been making. Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, just wanted to expand upon one point that Christy just brought up, which was after the 2020 census, they had to retool the SHI list. And our units that to get us to 10% on what, Christy, you probably remember off the top of your head, but 80 something. So we had to completely retool our number on how we're going to get there and stay in safe harbor at the same time to get to the amount of units.
Yeah, the Gold Coast keeps moving out every 10 years. So it's a real challenge. So Malcolm, did you want to add anything?
This is fascinating conversation. As we develop more and build more houses that aren't necessarily affordable housing, does that affect our number of houses and therefore we have to increase
No,
our
it's only
affordable housing?
year-round occupied. The SHI list number is
It's
based on
only
year-round
year-round
occupied
occupied.
dwellings.
Because I was thinking all these little cottages springing up, we'd never catch up
Yeah.
if we had to count those.
No, seasonally occupied dwellings don't count. Yeah. Okay, so the request before us is to authorize me to sign the submission for Safe Harbor to EOHLC. So pleasure of the board.
Move approval?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thanks, Christy. And then up next, do you want to introduce the next item? Okay.
Yes, so the last request in front of you is a request from the Affordable Housing Trust for an additional authorization of funding to Housing Nantucket for the completion of the Wiggles Way development. So we have Ann Kuspa and Steve Hollister, who are the developer and the owner's agent, to walk us through the request. And again, I have Vicki Marsh with me and Brian Turbot, who are available to answer questions.
Go ahead, Ann. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much. Ann Kuspa here from Housing Nantucket. I'm the executive director. And I first just want to express appreciation to this board and the Affordable Housing Trust for the dedication to addressing the island's affordable housing needs. So I appreciate all the work that you're doing. So steady progress continues across the street at Wiggles Way, 31 Fairgrounds Road. We have a 22-unit mixed income rental housing development under construction there. We are nearing completion. And like many other affordable housing developments across the state and locally, we've run into some challenges. Most recently, our builder experienced a health event at the end of August that necessitated some changes to the project's structure and management. And thankfully, his health is improving. However, we needed to switch gears a bit, and we engaged Stevens & Co. to help us to complete the project for project management and bring the project across the finish line before the end of Q1 2025. So through this transition, we assessed the amount of work that needed to get done, and it was brought to our attention that there were going to be some significant cost overages and additional work that would be needed to finish the project. So there were also some large outstanding balances to subcontractors that we did not know of until just recently. This prompted a need to secure some additional funding, and we determined that the amount required to finish the project was $3.87 million above the existing contract. So we went to the bank first, and we tried to figure out how we could fund this through financing in that way. We also have been meeting regularly with Affordable Housing Trust members in a construction committee, and we all have been really trying to think creatively about how we were going to address this cost overage. We requested $2.545 million from the Affordable Housing Trust, and after many, many hours and meetings and thorough scrutiny, that request was awarded. So we are very relieved to have the ongoing support of the Affordable Housing Trust in that way. And so that's why we're here today to seek approval from this board to approve that request. There are many merits to this project, and I don't want those to get lost sight of, including the, most importantly, the quality of the housing is superb. It is truly outstanding, and I hope and I know that many of you have taken the time to go over and tour the site, and I appreciate that, and I think that it's universal that it's amazing. It's beautiful. So anyone would be proud to live there, and we are very much looking forward to offering the units to community members very soon. We were hearing right now about Safe Harbor. This project has helped us to maintain Safe Harbor since 2022, and the units are on the subsidized housing inventory, and they will continue to be so in perpetuity. 6 of the units are forever municipally preference, so there's a municipal preference on 6 of these units, which means that the municipality can use those units for housing municipal employees. All of the units will be rented to year-round residents at affordable rents at the levels of 80%, 100%, actually 110%, and 150% of the area median income. Those are calculated by formula, and the rents will not exceed what's affordable at those levels. There's also some community benefits. Last week, we turned on the massive solar array that is above the carport that's installed there. So this will generate 133 megawatts of power through a renewable energy source, the sun, and that was done through support from Remain Nantucket, some funding from the Affordable Housing Trust to help us with that, and then our own resources. So we're really excited about that. That will make the project net zero overall, so that helps the tenants to have reliable and controlled electricity costs in perpetuity. We're also working with the land bank to convey the front portion of the lot to them, and they will continue to maintain it as a public park that will be available to all of the neighbors and anyone to use, as well as the residents. So the community has been really great in supporting us through this difficult time, especially Affordable Housing Trust members who have taken the time to understand the complexities of our situation right now. The municipal housing director has been amazing. The municipal finance director also. Everyone's been very helpful in scrutinizing what's going on and helping us come up with solutions. Tradespeople have been extremely patient in waiting for funding to get paid, so we definitely want to give a shout out to them. The EOHLC has also helped us to identify funding sources that we were not aware of, including the ARPA Act fund. So that's the, the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funding that was made available from the feds in 2021. And so that was something that we weren't really aware of, and EOHLC helped us to become aware of that. And then also we're thankful to our constituents for their patience, because they are, they're in bad situations, and we really want to bring these units online as soon as possible. And like I said, by the end of Q1 2025, we're very confident in Stevens & Co. in bringing us over the finish line. There's been massive amounts of work done even in this short time, and the project is really shaping up. So very nearly complete. Housing Nantucket remains committed to the project to see it through until the end. And we're very grateful to the Affordable Housing Trust and this board for entertaining this request. Oh, by the way, Steve Hollister, our owner's agent, is here with me to entertain, to answer any questions. So I'll leave that to you.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Malcolm, are you leaning in?
I'm just forming,
Okay.
this is obviously an important project for a lot of reasons, but I just get very annoyed at the last minute to someone asking me for $2.5 million. And if it's a management problem, why are we the ones that have to bail out the management or the builder? And have you really dug an audit as to why?
Yes.
I would like to see those numbers as to why we're $2.5 million at the last minute. This is why I didn't put an extension on my house last summer, because I could never tell what was going to cost. And I'm just...
Well, you bring up very good points, and we are conducting an audit. I'll leave, if you'd like more information about that, I can get Steve Hollister up here to talk to you about that, or Brian Turbid as well. So we're looking through all the invoices. Steve's done the bulk of the work, so would you like that?
Yeah, I can't vote either way. I'm sorry, until I see that.
Understood.
So my name is Steve Hollister. I'm the owner's agent who's helped manage the construction project. So Malcolm, yes, we have provided projected cost of completion. It outlines all of the outstanding balances that remain. We've worked with all of the subcontractors directly to establish those balances, define the remaining scope of work, and identify the costs associated with all of that remaining work. And so one of the things I'm here to talk about is sort of what's different this time around, and that is a primary difference. We've worked with each of those subcontractors directly. We know what the finish line is. We are as close as we have ever been so far. This project is right around the corner. If you were to walk through these units, they look like you could sleep there tonight.
It's on my list to come and see. But.
And the preponderance of this funding is going to be going to those subcontractors who have sort of willingly worked with us to find a solution to this problem. Many of them have said, okay, we'll continue to work. We know this is an important project. We know it is worthy of our efforts. And so that's where this money is going to be going. We do have a new management structure. The financial management of the project from this point forward is flowing through our Division of Capital Asset Management Certified Contractor. We have an invoice review process that is two-stage. So it will go first to Housing Nantucket, who will pay those invoices using a revolving line of credit of their own resources. And then the money thereafter will go to the invoices thereafter will go to the town for further scrutiny and reimbursement. So there's sort of a dual checks and balances system. As far as the projected cost of completion, we have provided that through Christie to the town. We'd be happy to provide it to you directly. I think that answers the initial question at least.
It was in our packet. So, Matt, did you want?
Yeah, I think Malcolm is onto something. I think, I support this. I went and visited it the other day. It is beautiful. It's going to be incredible. And it seems, all in, it seems like a lot of money, but having just, 5-6 years ago, I did a couple cottages and they'd be twice as much now, and these are less than those. And so, I think I think, yeah, that's great. I think that, Malcolm, I'm not worried, not necessarily just about this 3 million, but I think there should be learning from this. I had some good conversations with Billy earlier, Billy Cassidy, and talked to him about why are you, how can the price on a prefab change? You've given a down payment, you've given an amount. Well, it wasn't an amount on a set price. And so I think that's a learning that in the future, it should be a set price. And if you pay a little bit of a premium, but you've got a set price, that's great, because then you know what your cost is, because you're going to the taxpayers, you're going to the town and asking for a set amount of money. I think that some sort of forensic audit of the entire thing. I know HUD does it and LIHTC does it, and they audit it and make sure it's done, that everything is done the right way it's done. I think we should be considering that, and it should be available to all the housing people. And if there's things we learn, those should be widely available. The more we learn, the better off we are as a community doing this. And if there are things we learn that will, keep the costs reasonable or ensure that we don't have 2 or 3 asks on every project, I think that we should be considering that. So, I don't look at this negative. I look at an audit. I look at, digging into it after in a positive way. Like, how can we do better? I'm not looking at it as, someone did anything wrong. I don't think anything wrong was done, but I think there are things we probably could improve. So I support it, but I agree with, Malcolm's on the audit. I had written that down.
Okay. And any other questions or comments from the board? I know Brian stood up, so I'm going to ask him.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian Turbot, Director of Municipal Finance. So, Matt, to answer your question, that was something we have already told Housing Nantucket and the developer that is going to be undertaken as part of this when they came back after with this proposal and this ask. We told them that it was something that we were going to do as part of this. We have reached out to our actual independent auditors. We can't have them do it, but we've asked them for names of firms that could do this so that we could contact some of them and get an understanding of what it would take, what it would entail, and a cost. But it is something that both the housing director, Christy, and I are very adamant has to be done to go through this project. So it will be done.
And I want to, Penny actually sent a letter, which is in the packet, that contextualizes the cost of this project overall. And we have to remember, I always have to be reminded of all of the craziness that's happened, pandemic, post-pandemic, the insatiable demand for construction, tradespeople on Nantucket, and pricing of everything, right? So, Malcolm, to your point, it's very hard to predict the cost of anything right now, and very few people are doing fixed bid contracts on anything because costs are increasing. I too declined to do an addition on my house because I couldn't get a firm number on what it would cost, right? So I think we have to hold this in the context of all of that, and also say we have learned from this. There are financial procedures and policies that we make standard on town-funded projects going forward. But fundamentally, I toured it this morning. I've been through it a number of times through literally from the foundation. I've been over there every phase of this project, and this is an incredibly high-quality project, and we will be proud to have invested in it and to have it in our portfolio of year-round housing for decades to come. So it's really critical, and there are folks waiting for these units. So I'm very much in favor of this additional funding. And everyone should look in the packet. There's some context about other projects we've been doing and what their per square foot cost and what this landed at. And it's really well within range of current the construction costs in the last 5 years or so. So this is not a case of something costing 30% more than it should have. It's more than was hoped it would be, is the way I would describe that. So I'm supporting this with that thinking in mind. Anybody else or a motion?
I will support this, but I am worried that we are kind of getting into these situations where the costs are escalating faster than things can get built, and it's really hard as a government entity to plan for that. Luckily, we have funding that's been approved, but it's frustrating. And I toured it yesterday as well, and I mean, the units are really beautiful. It is something that we're going to be very proud of, but we've got to figure out a way to manage these a lot better going forward to make sure that we're on track with what the budget is. But again, I think at this point, we want it finished. So I'll make a motion to approve it.
Second.
Tom?
Yeah, I just want to say I agree with everything my four colleagues have said. And at Affordable Housing Trust, we talked about this at length over several meetings, and I think over 2 months. And there were a lot of questions that needed to be answered, including from Christie's office and from Brian Turbett's office and from trust members. And it took a while to get that all together. So it had the ability to even come to us. And in the beginning, I don't think there was enough support for this because there were a lot of open-ended questions because of exactly what Matt and Malcolm have brought up. But my vote at the trust was contingent on the audit and some of the other provisions in this. So I also support this based on some of the details in the vice chair of the Affordable Housing Trust, Penny's letter, and that I've been through it several times, and I think the park is going to be great out front for the neighbors and the folks in the neighborhood. It is a very nice project, and there are definitely some lessons to be learned from this. And I think Christie's office is very much aware of that moving forward.
Vicki, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add to the comments that have been raised that in drafting the grant agreement between Housing Nantucket and the trust, that we incorporated several conditions in this agreement so that we have had an opportunity to review the documents that are going to be assigned to Stevens and Company as the new contractor for this project. We've had an opportunity to look at the change order that is justifying the amount that is going to be granted in this project. And also in the event that there is any default or failure to comply with the terms of the grant agreement, that Housing Nantucket would be asked to assign its rights to these contracts and the permit in the event that the project need to be completed. So it positions the trust to be able to have the additional protection in the event that there are any failures to be able to complete this project. We have received certain documentation with respect to the arrangement between Fairgrounds Common and Stevens and Company that just was delivered to me today, and I plan to review those as well and can issue any further comments on them.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. We ready for a vote? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I'm abstained,
Okay, and Malcolm's abstained, so that's,
pending the audit.
okay. All right. Next up is a report from the sewer department on the progress on the third sewer force main project. Ziad?
Good evening. I'm going to share my screen here quick. Is it, everybody could see the screen here, right?
Yep, we can see it and we can hear you.
Great. All right, so I got Frank Ayotte. Good evening, my name is Ziad Carey. I am a principal with Environmental Partners Group. I'm also the design engineer on this project. And Frank Ayotte is the OPM with Hazen and Sawyer. I don't know, Frank, if you want to start this.
Yeah, just tonight, we're just going to give an update on the project to the select board and those tuning in. I'm going to talk a little bit about the schedule and what we've accomplished to date. And then I'm going to turn the presentation over to Ziad, who's going to discuss in some detail what we've done since restarting the project in September, as well as what's planned for the rest of the year, excuse me, and through 2025. So just some highlights. Hard to believe we started this project about 3 years ago. And I'm happy to report that 2025 looks like our final construction year, which is great news. And we have everybody to thank for the success of that. The project itself financially is within the appropriation and is projected to finish out that way. Next slide. So just some numbers of the work completed today. 100% of the 24-inch force main has been installed. 78% of the 20-inch force main is installed. 80% of the valves and access control structures are complete. And as far as the utilities within the force main route, that includes gravity sewer main, water main, and stormwater. Just about 70% of all of that has also been replaced. And these were utilities that needed replacement within the force main route. And we've also completed about 50% of the restoration work, which is coming out great. We've got a great subcontractor doing that work. So Ziad, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you, and Ziad's going to talk a little bit about where we started in September and what's planned for the remainder of the construction year in 2025. Ziad.
Thanks, Frank. So just to sum it up a little bit, this force main is about 19,000 linear feet. You've heard Frank talk about 20 and 24 inch. In reality, the force main from the Surfside sewer pump station to the treatment plant transitions from 20 inch to 24 inch. And then from the C Street pump station to the Surfside pump station, it is a 20 inch. And the unique feature about this force main, it cross connects with the existing 20 that was built in 1984. It's a ductile iron pipe, and it connects in 3 spots. And not only this, on Main Street, there's a future hookup or connection to the 20-inch force main to the Matticat expansion. So along Main Street, that's where we are today. There will be a stub to hook up for future connection there into the new force main. And the reason these force main interconnects, because that would give the town the ability to be able to split the flow in segments for ease of cleaning and maintenance long term. So the green here obviously shows the restoration work that was happening this past construction season, the fall, and then the red is what's remaining of the pipeline, and specifically on Liberty and Winter Street going into Pine, and we'll talk about that a little more in details. So Liberty Street, as of Memorial Day last year, we rounded the corner from Gardner, and we kind of stopped at that point. We picked it up this year here in September. It was a tough stretch. None of it really was easy, to be honest with you, but the water main was replaced there, the gravity sewer, and then the force main. We went into Winter Street right over here, and you could see Winter, ultimately when it's all restored, the cobbles will go back as final restoration. Right in front of the Coffin School, that was a little bit tight, working around existing utilities, and you could see the middle picture up here where I'm hovering. This is the Main Street crossing where you have large electric valves and duct banks. It's like almost a surgical procedure to kind of put that force main right through there, and the water main as well. As you could notice, you probably see in the site over there today, but it's a slow process right across Main just because of the complexity of it. And then when we get into Pine, obviously the right of way becomes a little bit tighter, and then the speed of construction will slow down accordingly. Top left, it's a cistern that was encountered along the sewer force main alignment. This happened a couple different times in the past. These are abandoned in place. So I've been working with the sewer department and DPW. They get filled and abandoned. This is the Pine Street work that's ongoing currently here today. All the water main on Pine from the top down towards Silver has been completed, and now we're working at the crossing from Main to the top of Pine. Restoration work started this September. Prior to that, all the downtown roadways were supposed to be full depth reclamation. But what we did, we made some adjustments along the way. Again, Frank mentioned this is the third year of the contest here. So we paved C Street, Step Lane, and Center Street. We did the binder course about 2 years ago, and then we let it sit, and it held up extremely well. So the thought process that we changed the approach in terms of full depth reclamation instead of ripping up the whole roadways and then subject people to this agony. So we figured we do a leveling course at an overlay so that we speed up the process and save some money along the way. All the sidewalk have been restored. The curbing from C Street all the way down to Center, down to Chester, and part of Lily Street as well. You could see some of that decorative flagstones, and then these were basically cataloged, labeled, and then stockpiled when they were removed, and they went back in the same locations.
Brooke, can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
Just
Sure.
I had a question on the sidewalks.
Yeah.
Is, when we put those back, were they put in with a base that could handle trucks and cars parking and driving over them, like Rob McNeil started doing couple years ago? Or were they put back with sand?
So the curbing was put with high early strength concrete in front of it to hold the curbing in place. The sidewalk, unfortunately, we get down to compacted gravel, and then the thought process was to put sand. The initial contract calls for sand based on DPW details, but we worked with Drew and we substituted some of the sand with
Stone dust.
stone dust just to make it more stable.
Correct.
Unfortunately, we'll get into a little bit more, but obviously these sidewalks are being used for parking, and it becomes very evident when you have a heavy truck, especially when you turn in the wheel, like a delivery truck, and we have some photos here to show. Unfortunately, that's becoming an issue. It will become an issue long term. But to answer your question, the curbing is set in a concrete bed. However, the actual sidewalk, brick isn't.
Yeah, and it is in compacted stone dust though, which is a much better product than sand.
Okay, Matt?
Right, yeah, I just noticed on page, I think it was 54, so there's a couple pages down from this, you noted the problems with the sidewalks. It's one of my pet peeves. I don't think we should be parking on them. I don't think we should be driving on them. And, and so, that's a whole nother policy issue that we as a town need to tackle. But there was one that was redone up near Academy Hill, and 2 days later, it was ruined. So that, the person put in, I don't know how many, tens of thousands of dollars, put in a brand new sidewalk, and 2 days later, the sidewalk was ruined. And so I think that that's something as a town and as a board, at some point, we need to put a little more focus in, and I'm glad that they included it, because it gave me a chance to point it out. Thank you.
Yeah, I did skip to this specific one right here. This is at the intersection of Chester and Center. This sidewalk was perfectly done. And then, of course, you have a massive truck like an H20 was delivering there. Of course, you could see the wheel marks when you turn the wheels, and you're going to disturb the bedding of the, again, this is a brick, it's a brick layer, and it's not going to take on an H20 loading. So that's what you're going to get oftentimes. And then the one on the right, that's the step lane. You could see obviously the parking on there. Now, if the cars park on it, you're probably not going to see the impact right away, but especially when you get like H20 loaded vehicles and heavy trucks, that's going to make a dent right away.
Okay.
Okay, so this is Lily Street here. On the partial pavement restoration, we talk about partial, and as you could all maybe experienced it, Surfside was a little bit of a nightmare to work with, but we worked with the schools and other town departments with modified hours. Surfside, all of it was full depth reclamation because it's well traveled. So everything was turned in place, and we did it in 3 different segments. It got done. So we have binder on Surfside, and in addition to that, the DPW completed the Safe Walk to School program there with Victor Brandon on the curbing. And we will come back at some point in the fall, in the spring to top it. And hopefully that should be rather quick. South Shore Road, the same way. The only thing we did on South Shore Road was 2 inches of binder. We basically were racing against the weather and the elements, and we're able to just do the entire length of South Shore Road only with 2 inches binder. So we come back in the spring, we'll do another 2 inches of top and then binder, I'm sorry. So there'll be 4 inches and an inch and a half of overlay. So this is a summary. We talked about the final restoration. This is what's remaining from C Street all the way out to South Shore Road. It should go rather quick. So the thought process here is the contractor asked for an extension. I know Frank got into it early on. The extension was provided through the June 30th of this year, but most likely they will have to come back and finish some cleanup and paving in the fall of 2025. So all these streets have been already paved. All we need to do is come back in the fall and in the spring and do leveling and overlay from C Street all the way up to Liberty. Winter's being done today, so there's a lot of disturbance, and the thought process is to leave it until the fall, so give it enough time to settle before we put the cobbles back in there. Same thing with the Main Street crossing. It's just only a short distance, but the cobbles would have to go back. Pine, Silver, Pine will be the last thing we'll probably do, which is the fall of 2025. And Silver, Pleasant, Atlantic, those will be leveling and overlay. Same with South Shore and Surfside.
Madam Chair, may I ask just one question?
Ziad, hang on one sec. Malcolm has a question.
Go back to your cobbles. I mean, I've become quite interested in cobbles recently. The NHA just had a interesting conference on coastal resiliency, and there were people there that said we were putting our cobbles down incorrectly. I was just wondering if you would get some consultation on that.
We could certainly look into it. I know we have not put anything back in terms of cobbles. I know there is a stretch on North Water Street that needs to go back as cobbles. Same with the Main Street crossing, and then of course all of Winter. But thank you for this point. We'll look into it, and then we'll consult also with DPW and see how we proceed with that one, see what we find.
Right. It was just interesting that we had someone, a cobble expert here, and commented on our cobbles.
We had a study about that a number of years ago, and so that's also available. And they went out to people like this guy, and you think that the cobbles are like this way, and they're really the long way.
Yeah.
So when they're putting them down, they're making them the long way down, which is you wouldn't think that, and you can tell if someone has done a good job or not by how many cobbles are left at the end. If they're putting them back and there's 10% left, then they put them sideways, is what the old timers would say. So anyway.
Interesting that you mentioned that too, because the MTK is an excellent subcontractor that luckily we, Robert B. Auer engaged with the restoration process. One guy was telling me the same exact thing. So if it is something that the town may want to consider, we certainly would discuss it with the DPW and then see how we move forward.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. A little bit left. Are you guys done? Nope, there we go.
Yeah, so basically this kind of sums it up. Utility work, this will be done. Definitely will be done by May of 2025. What we'd like to do, test the remaining portion of the new force main, commission the force main, and then there is a big chunk of work that needs to happen at the plant today, which is a header, and that work requires to have minimal flow because it's a bunch of force main converging into the headworks into the plant. So this is scheduled to be done in January, so we're going to be tackling this, but nonetheless, all the utilities will be completed by May of 2025, and then any remaining work with final cleanup, and I show this here, the schedule. You know, most likely we'll have to be here in the fall. I don't know how long. It could be just simply September and October, and then clean up and wrap up.
Massive project, thank you. Any other questions from the board? Okay, thanks for the update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda is Town Council Study Committee, request for non-binding 2025 annual town meeting warrant article and 2025 annual town election ballot question regarding change of government. Joe.
Good evening, everybody. I'll try to be fairly quick. I think you remember when I was last microphone, right? Better? Who am I? Hi, I'm Joe Grouse. I'm the chairman of the Town Council Study Committee. And I was here at the end of September. We talked about a number of scheduling issues in terms of how the potential article for putting an article in front of the voters in terms of a potential conversion to a town council form of government, what the schedule might be. One of the things that came out of that conversation with the select board was the suggestion that perhaps we could consider non-binding sense of the meeting votes at town meeting, as well as a non-binding sense of the ballot vote, I guess, on the election after the town meeting. So I'm here tonight to ask the select board to include a non-binding sense of the meeting vote for the May 2025 warrant, put it into the warrant, and a companion sense of the ballot vote for the town election. I delivered to Libby, and she delivered on to KP Law, to John Giorgio, I guess about 3 weeks ago, kind of a draft write-up that would be form the explanatory paragraphs in the non-binding vote for the town meeting, and it could be used in the ballot. KP Law modified the write-up quite a bit so that the write-up that would go in the ballot has more description and perhaps more advocacy kind of language in it, whereas I guess the rules dealing with non-binding votes on ballots have to be more neutral. And so KP Law rewrote my submission. Our committee is fine with both of them, and I guess we were looking for your approval and support to put them on the town meeting ballot, as well as on the town meeting warrant, as well as on the ballot.
Thanks, Joe. John, did you want to add anything? Because I know there have been a few emails floating around this week with regard to this, and you had made a comment about the advisability of doing both. This suggestion had actually come from this board, so if you have advice to the contrary, I'd love to hear that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I'm concerned that if you have both a ballot question and a town meeting warrant article, that you're really addressing two different audiences, and there is the potential of getting an inconsistent answer, which I think would create a lot of I guess the word is doubt as to what the voters really want to do. You know, town meeting becomes, depending upon where this would be placed on the warrant and how exhausted people are, you can often have a reduced number of voters at town meeting who do not necessarily represent the full scope of the electorate. So you can do both. I'm just concerned about inconsistent results. And my thought is, if you're looking to get the broadest possible voter involvement, that you might want to think of just doing a ballot question at the 2025 annual town election, which I've explained in the past, that is simply a vote by the select board to add that to the election warrant. I did change, the two are different in that the warrant article language has a lot of advocacy. It has a lot of pros and cons. I'm not sure where the select board stands on how much advocacy you want in either question. But for purposes of the ballot, we've stripped it down to just a single paragraph that sets forth the basics of what the committee is looking at. And the question is, do the voters support a change in government as described in that ballot question?
Yeah. So I was probably the person who thought we should do both. And the reason is that the process involves both a town meeting vote and a ballot vote when we're actually going through the process, correct?
When you actually go to amend or to revise the charter, once it's written, it's actually a three-step process. It would be a vote at town meeting to authorize a home rule petition. It would be, if that passes, it would have to be approved by the general court. And then the general court would most likely add a ballot question requirement to actually adopt the new charter.
Okay.
Is that a majority or a 2/3 vote?
Everything would be a majority vote, Matt. The home rule petition is a majority vote, and the ballot question is a majority vote. The only other way you could do this, given this is a major charter change, the only other way you could do this is through an elected charter commission.
Okay. So my logic was we need to poll both audiences because both audiences will weigh in eventually on the change. And I was curious actually if there was going to be a discrepancy between town meeting and the ballot because they're two different audiences. So that was my reasoning behind it. So I don't know whether that changes your thinking on it.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead,
Can I just throw a little something in there? I did speak to Sarah Alger within the last couple of days about where a non-binding sense of the meeting vote would go for the town meeting, and it would go sort of really one of the first things to be done. So we would, you can presume that we would deal with the biggest possible audience at town meeting. The Town Council Study Committee, we did debate whether we wanted both the town meeting one or the ballot one. I think the feeling is, we'd get information out of, regardless of the outcome of the vote, we would get very valuable information about what the voters think in the sort of smaller universe it would be at town meeting, you'd presume at town meeting, and the larger universe it would be on the ballot. So I think going for both, certainly from our perspective, would be basically positive information and would give both the Town Council Study Committee as well as the Select Board, I think, valuable information about which way this might run.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I don't mean to dissuade anybody from going the route of doing both. If you think as the policymakers in town, that's the best way to go, then that's perfectly fine with me. There is an advantage of a town meeting vote, of course, and that is that there's debate and people can express their views, and that might give the Town Government Study Committee more information or consider things that maybe haven't already been considered. So if that's your wish, you're free to go both routes. And if there is an inconsistent vote, then we would just have to deal with that and interpret the results.
Yeah, exactly. Any other comments or questions from the board or sort of a motion to support moving forward in this direction I think might be helpful tonight? Obviously, with final language to come. Anybody want to do anything?
No, I'll motion to move forward with both.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks
Great.
for all your work, everybody.
Okay. Can I just add, the committee is going to resume meeting in January. We expect to finish the draft charter probably in February. We'll spend the rest of the time prior to the meeting doing outreach and public communication the way we've done before. And hopefully we'll be able to be prepared for what I understand would be a special town meeting in the fall would be our preference, but we'll see how that all goes. Again, thank you for your time, and I appreciate all your support.
Yeah, you guys have put in a lot of hours. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
so when this, I will take both the ballot question and the town meeting vote, and I'll revise them a bit. I think I'll take out any reference to the May annual town meeting and just not specify a particular date, if you will, for actually presenting the charter amendment. But in the town meeting vote, which I will be sending you in a slightly different format, I would request that the board look at that carefully, because I added some things here and there, and I'd like Joe to look at it as well. And I think what you need to decide is how much advocacy or pros and cons do you want to include in the question? You'll see there's a section on the benefits, and then there's a section on some of the drawbacks of the change in government. But it's up to you to decide how you want to frame that town meeting vote.
Yeah. I remember when we started this process, I pointed out that one person's negative could be another person's positive, depending on their perspective. So I wonder if I have read it and phrasing it in terms of positive things and drawbacks, advantages and drawbacks may not be the best way to write it up, but just as changes, potential, these are the changes that will happen. This is what will be new, and this is what will be left behind from the old, rather than it's good or bad kind of framing.
Yeah, I'll, happy to work with John's edits, and we'll, pass it back and forth and sort of
Okay.
get it into a more refined form. So we're fine with that.
Terrific.
Great,
But this
thanks.
is support to move forward, so toward those two ends. Okay, great.
That's a good suggestion, Brooke, I think, to.
Yeah. Okay, next up, we have a public hearing to determine the tax allocation by classification under Chapter 369 Acts of 1982 as amended, the percentage of the residential exemption to be granted for fiscal year 2025. This was continued from December 4th, 2024, so we'll continue with the public hearing. Mr. Ranney?
Good evening, Rob Ranney, Town Assessor. As you all know, this is something that we do every year. We need to have you all approve the, as we get this up here. We can start with this one. So as part of this process, we have to determine values across the island. This slide, which is a little hard to read, shows the differences in the values from fiscal 2024 into 2025. The values are not, they've gone up, but they've not gone up in a huge fashion. As you can probably see, it's on the order average for residential of about, I'm not sure I can't read what that says, but it's about 4%, 3 to 4%. And then these are the various classifications of different properties, land uses across the island, and you can see the values there, the total values, the parcel count, and so on. As part of this process, if there's no questions on this slide, we'll go to the next one, Erica. These are the breakdowns of the value. We have the residential class, which is by far our largest valuation class. We have a smaller open space, commercial, industrial, and personal property. And those totals are there for fiscal 25. Fiscal 24 is right below it, so you can see a little bit of a comparison. And then part of this process also is adopting a shift to the commercial, industrial, personal property side. Well, go back up just a little bit, Erica. So last year we had a 1.7 shift to the commercials. And what that looks like for fiscal 25 is at the top of this slide. So what it does is it shifts some of the burden from the residential class to the commercial, industrial, and personal property classes. And those percentages are up on the slide. And, okay, you can go down, please, Erica. This is a brief history of the tax rate and for all the classes, residential, open space, and commercial, in addition to the residential exemption for the last several years. The residential exemption has been 25% of the average residential value on the island since at least 2020, and those numbers are there. You can see as the average residential value has increased, so has the exemption amount. And then the column that says value X, that is the tax dollar amount of the exemption using that year's tax rate. If you want to go down to the next one, please. So this slide shows at the top what you all chose and approved last year. There was a 1.7 shift. Those are the tax rates. And it was a 25% residential exemption. And those are the average tax bills there. There's an average strictly residential tax bill. There's one that is a year-round tax bill with a residential exemption, and then the average commercial tax bill. Below the part that's in green are what this year's numbers look like using our current values. And if the top one under the 25% shows what a 1.7 shift does, the 25% residential exemption would be 827,000 roughly. And just to refresh everyone's memory, the way that works is we take the assessed value of the property, we subtract that exemption amount, and what's left is what you get taxed on. And then you can see as you move over to the right, the difference between what the average 2024 numbers were and the increase for what 2020 or 2025 would be. So the average residential, strictly residential tax bill goes up about $844. If you are a recipient of the residential exemption, your tax bill goes up about $230. And then the average commercial tax bill goes up about $1,500. And that's pretty much it. So it's up to you all to decide on this. This is again is a comparison, the tax rates from last year and then proposed for this year. And I know Mr. Fee probably has questions for me.
Well, just one thing was interesting. I brought this up a couple weeks, but maybe a month ago. But in Boston, they're at the maximum. They're at 1.75. And so they are now struggling because their commercial is tanking, and they're trying to get the legislature to let them go to 2.0 instead of 1.75, and I'm not sure they're going to get that.
Yeah.
And so it was something I hadn't really thought about before. But, we have thought about it in regards to the residential exemption because we haven't maxed that out, even though there have been select board members I've served with that wanted to, but we haven't done that. But I think on the commercial, something similar we should be thinking about. Because I think if there is if we do have an issue later, we can put more back on the commercial. Something that I'm not saying how much to do this year, but just it should be something we think about as a conservative move that's a safety valve that puts a little bit more options in the future. If we keep it at the maximum, we can't change it. We can't we can't bump it up at all. So it was just something I hadn't really thought of.
Yeah, and that's been, frankly, that's been the board's approach for the last several years, is to not max out the options because, as you'll see later in the meeting, there are some big ticket items that are going to be coming which will have tax impacts to average people. And if you've maxed out your options to provide some relief, then everyone's in trouble, so.
Right.
Okay, comments or questions from the board? Don?
I think that we should leave the exemption and the shift the same this year but with the idea that if, say, the Island Home and the DPW are to get approved and go under construction, that maybe we want to make some changes next year or the year after to affect people's tax bills.
Anybody else comment or pleasure?
Is that a motion?
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you, Erica. Second on that motion?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The public hearing is now closed. I did not remind people that it was a public hearing. Are we good? Okay. If anybody wanted to speak, raise your hand quickly.
I think I might be the only one who gets excited about this
Yeah,
every year.
okay.
So it'll be.
Seeing none, we're good to go.
You
Okay.
and I.
You and me, we're the only ones.
Yeah, so Don, is that a motion to keep?
Yes, motion to
us-
keep them at the same with the new tax rate as identified in here.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's unanimous. Thanks, Rob.
Thank
for
you.
the analysis and explanation. Okay, next up, Town Manager's Report. Libby?
Presentation. But keep message handy. Okay, it's that time of year. Section 4.2D3 of the town charter requires the town manager to prepare and submit to the select board an annual operating budget, annual recommended operating budget. The document in your packet, this presentation, is a summary containing an overview of updated projections, our recommendations, and next steps. The finance director and I are going to take you through it, as we normally do. We also have a budget message, which contains our recommendations, projections, and various issues in detail, and we are going to give you an overview of that at the end of this presentation. Overview, not go through all 20-something pages of it, with many, many more pages of appendices. Our fiscal '26 budget process began with the issuance of, Erica, I think you can go to the next page. All right, just stay there for a sec. Our budget process began with the issuance of budget instructions to our departments on August 15th. That's about a month earlier than in prior years. And that was so that departments would have time to start more fully utilizing our budget software. It's called OpenGov. And because of the September special town meeting, we needed to get development going sooner. Preliminary projected expenses and revenues were reviewed with the board on September 11th. And we reviewed every general fund and enterprise fund departmental budget with those individual departments, plus with the cabinet as a whole, from mid-October through the end of November. It was a very busy time. Along the way, we've been reviewing, researching, reconsidering, evaluating, or analyzing new or additional information. Our fiscal '26 budget objectives include what is shown on this slide, our standard objective, which is keeping the recommended operating budget within projected revenue, addressing priorities in the Select Board's strategic plan with particular emphasis on the housing focus area, focusing on infrastructure maintenance and improvements, and new facilities. Our biggest projects are shown here, and we have other projects. Of course, we have other projects, but these are the most significant due to their expense. Next slide, please. We are continuing to address staffing issues with a variety of strategies. We're active, and those are listed out there. We're actively working to operationalize the concept of sustainability throughout the town government, and in particular with applicable projects. Capital planning and project management remain priorities, and because it's been difficult to dedicate resources not already committed to other functions to give projects the attention required, we are having to engage and rely on outside consultants and engineers, which also require oversight. At last year's budget presentation, we mentioned that we were in the process of advertising for a project manager position, which would be contained within town administration. We're pleased to report that we were able to fill that position. It is currently a hybrid position. The person remotes in and also comes to the island routinely. We are continuing to work on filling a vacant funded town engineer position in the DPW, which would have a major role with DPW project management. Again, as mentioned last year, management of town-controlled housing has become extremely time-consuming for several staff people, some of whom are not even in the housing office. We were able to fill a rental property manager position in the housing office, and while that has certainly helped, the volume and complexity of managing our growing number of housing units is too significant for one position. We established a deputy housing director position to assist with this aspect of town housing needs, town employee housing needs, as well as other technical assistance for the director, but we have not been able to fill that position yet. Okay, Brian is going to take us through the next several slides. Brian.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and the board. So through the budget process, through all of the work that we've done in revenue, we believe that we will be able to raise $161.6 million, which is net of the property tax abatements. We are estimating that we would need to allocate approximately $200,000 for property tax abatements in fiscal '26. The total projected expenses as recommended by town administration is $161.4 million. Currently, that would leave $227,000 in unused levy capacity projected. I do want to remind everybody that there's still some things as we work through the entire budget process to get to town meeting that may either increase or decrease that potentially. The state hasn't even started their budget process. They just barely had the revenue consensus meeting. So state aid is still something that we have budgeted a number, but that certainly could change as we move through this process. Next slide, please, Erica. So on this slide, we typically have always shown what we had brought forward to and was ultimately approved at town meeting last year as fiscal '25, fiscal '26. You will see that we're estimating $127,441,000 in property tax. That is net of the unused levy capacity that we put back to the levy limit so that we don't raise the full amount of that levy limit in this presentation. All told, a 4.45% increase in revenue and 4.45% in expenditures allocated throughout this recommendation. Next slide, please, Erica. Here, we typically do like to just show that, as in practically all 351 communities across the Commonwealth, property tax revenue is the largest revenue source for communities. We're at about 79%. State aid is about 3%, rooms and meals tax is about 9%, and motor vehicles is 3%. All other local estimated receipts, including investment income, rentals, other things of that nature, 5%, and licenses and permits, approximately 2%. Next slide, please, Erica. General fund expenses. This year, the municipal departments is 30% of the budget. That includes all general fund operating departments in Article 8. School department is 27%. Non-departmental 29%, which includes health insurance, and it includes debt service, retirement, and then special appropriations are 14% of the budget. The majority of the special appropriations are the transfers to the enterprise funds that we fund a portion of through the general fund. Next slide, please. So operational expenses for fiscal '26, we are recommending $18,294,000, which does include the recommended transfer to the Affordable Housing Trust from the override. There is $898,000 of additional expense increase requests being either one-time or ongoing. Salaries of $29,565,000. It does include all collective bargaining agreements and the impacts of the comp and class study. Included within that $29 million number is $406,000 in additional personnel recommendations. Town expenses or school operational expenses, $7.1 million. Included in that is $500,000 of additional spending from the school. Part of that is a one-time request for funding of curriculum and a small amount to continue to try to help offset the special education costs that continue to the school continues to incur. And just over $36 million in school salaries, and that does include all collective bargaining agreements as well for the school, for the recently approved agreements. Next slide, please. Health insurance is projected at a 7.5% increase. Active employees is 13.5 million, and retirees 4.7 million. General insurance, the good news is it's not at 18.5%. It's a little under 15, which is much better than been in the last few years, but that's projected to be $5.5 million. Debt service per the amortization schedule, $14.9 million. Retirement, 7.6. We did actually receive earlier than ever the retirement assessment. This number does come in line with what we're projecting, and it is in line with the schedule that was approved by PERAC to have the system fully funded by 2038, and that is the 8.5% increase. Enterprise fund subsidies, $17.9 million, which is a 2.5% increase to those enterprise funds. Mosquito control, the same as 2.5% increase over last year at $190,000. Health and Human Services, $825,000. which is $650,000 from the general fund and $175,000 from the special purpose stabilization fund. Yes.
And that funding is already in there, so any changes in the cannabis, there's no impact this year.
Well, we have 175 already in there, so
Yeah,
there's
it's
no,
already in
that's,
there. Okay.
yes, that's
Yeah,
correct.
okay.
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
County assessment, $237,000. This substantial change is based on the projection of a slight decrease in the amount of deeds money that we're going to receive. That is just an initial projection at this point, but that's where we're building this budget based on. Reserve fund of $500,000. At this point, we have no unpaid bills that I'm aware of, so we have not put anything in, but if we did, we would typically fund those through free cash. Other post-employment benefits, the same $500,000 that we have always raised and appropriated. Cherry sheet charges, again, much like the revenue side of the budget from state aid, we're projecting 1.2 million, which is what the actual cherry sheet assessment is this year. Again, we're so early. The first budget from the governor won't even go to the House until January 22nd, which will be long into our budgets process by then. Community school, the same 600,000, and minimum capital funding, which, as everyone remembers, is 1% of prior year revenue, real and personal property taxes, and a portion of the local estimated receipts, 1.8 million. All told, 161.4 million is the recommendation. Yes.
With the community school with no increase, I'm assuming their costs go up.
They do, and they have been able to absorb those through the revolving funds and grants that they have.
Okay,
So-
great, thanks.
So this slide, every year we take you through the expense increase requests. I think this year we kind of wanted to be able to show what last year's requests requested were versus funded, in not only one time but ongoing, and then graphically compare them to what we're going to take you through for fiscal 26, one time and ongoing. Next slide. And here I will turn it back to the town manager for the EIRs.
So our recommendations for expense increase requests are based on the following criteria, and this is the same as it's been. Whether or not the item is a legal mandate, high prioritization is given for requests that support the board's strategic plan and/or are recommended in the 2018 staffing study, whether they improve departmental operations or efficiency, whether they're necessary to support new programming or existing programming, or provide continuity of operations. Each EIR is ranked using a point system. And I wanted to make a note about the requested EIRs, the ones that were submitted. We received a significant number of these, as we often do, and while we've actually funded many of them, we cannot fund all of them. And we have to take the big picture into consideration. We are fortunate to be able to fund what we're recommending, which is less than half of what was requested. The revenue increase from the room occupancy tax is allowing us to put forward recommendations to address areas which cannot progress without additional resources. However, we want to caution that we exercise conservative use of that revenue source. For one thing, some of the budget items being recommended are ongoing, and they will require continued funding into the future. Secondly, we believe that funding source is still not quite at a point where the amount received in fiscal '24, so far in fiscal '25, and being projected for fiscal '26 can be 100% relied on to remain at those levels due to economic impacts we cannot control and possible changes in how short-term rentals are regulated in Nantucket. Next slide, please. On the personnel side, we are recommending 8 new positions and some additional appropriation for budgets that have had personnel line items exceeded in the last fiscal year due to workload. The new positions are necessary to implement board goals and keep up with increased demands in certain areas, such as real estate and public records requests are needed to maintain a level of municipal services that a growing community requires, including public safety, and to address additional regulatory requirements adopted by town meeting. Next slide. Yep, thank you. On the expense side, we're recommending one-time expenses to address license costs so that Department of Public Works employees can be deployed more effectively, an additional vehicle for the IT department. If possible, we would seek to secure a grant to offset the cost of that vehicle, gear and travel expenses for new fire department recruits, as well as ensuring specific one-time vehicle maintenance expenses are covered for fiscal '26. Non-union compensation and classification schedule update. The most recent study we did for this group resulted in our first formally established non-union class and comp schedule. We did that 2 years ago. Industry standards support to doing those updates at least every 3 years to ensure that market salaries are understood and can be used to attract and retain qualified employees. And lastly, it was evident from last spring's annual town meeting and the most recent fall town meeting that use of additional space at the school requires cooling when it is warm outside. And on this slide, it's just really a lot of increased expenses to address operational costs. These things are just going up in cost, and they have to be paid for. Brian's going to take us through the next couple of slides.
So we've recommended $1,795,000 of expense increase requests. $1.2 million of that would come from the tax levy and other general revenues. Free cash of $216,000 in the general fund. Revolving fund would fund the STR registration revolving fund would fund that compliance position. And then county funding, we would utilize for the culture and tourism position that the town manager mentioned, and then also the paralegal position that has been recommended. Next slide, please. Free cash is a work in progress. The state is significantly down in the number of employees in DOR, and it's taking them longer to certify free cash. So right now, we are waiting for them to get to be able to review it. So we don't have the final number, but we know that the final number will comfortably allow us to recommend the one-time expenses in the general fund and the one-time expenses in the school budget. Once we have that number well in advance of town meeting, we'll be able to complete any other recommendations for free cash. But it will be, any recommendations would be in compliance with the town policy that has been established. Next slide. This is back where I'll turn it over to the town manager again.
Thank you. Outstanding items and current unknowns are shown here. State aid is always somewhat of a concern, and while, as Brian noted earlier, the state has not yet finalized its budget for fiscal '26, we are projecting level funding. None of the citizen warrant articles are typically included in our recommendation. We haven't included any in this budget either. If approved and determined to be implemented, they could have a cost impact, which has not been fully analyzed at this point. I think there's one major one that is not funded right now in this budget. If any of those items are approved, then funding will either not immediately be available or priorities will have to shift. As mentioned earlier, we do not believe we've had yet what could be considered a normal year of short-term rental revenue since the expansion of the room occupancy tax to short-term rentals in 2019, and the impact of any potential future town regulations is obviously unknown. I mean, I think we have come to, for quite frankly, rely on this source of revenue, and we just hope it sticks around. Escalating construction costs have impacted recent projects. This is not a problem unique to Nantucket. However, it is more significant due to our location and associated complications. The costs of the projects contained in the Coastal Resiliency Plan are astronomical, and we will need to prioritize these and seek alternate sources of funding wherever possible. We have a significant time investment in the preparations for the expiration of the waste services agreement for the solid waste operation. There are increasing costs to managing solid waste on Nantucket caused by regulatory requirements and other factors, including travel and disposal at off-island facilities. While we have a retirement assessment projection, and Brian, do you say we actually have it now from Barnstable County? Okay, so when we were preparing this, we didn't have it defined. Okay, we got it today, thank you. So that can be checked off the list. Offshore wind and right whale vessel speed restrictions have both taken, as you all know, an immense amount of time from several town staff and officials. Both of those remain unknown currently as to impact. Next slide, please. A number of future potential costs are listed on this slide, and some have been covered already in the presentation. And we just like to give you kind of a preview of what's coming up in the next few years. We have numerous plans in place or are in the process of being updated and or started or implemented. All of them contain projects that will have a cost impact. Some overlap and can be combined, but there's projects in every single one of these plans that are going to be costly. We have discussed employee retention and housing. In addition to town employee housing, community workforce housing is an ongoing goal and has associated costs. There are numerous parallel efforts at work with affordable housing. While we now have an IT position dedicated to cybersecurity, the cost could be enormous if the town system becomes compromised from a cybersecurity attack. Many cybersecurity attacks are implemented through carelessness and lack of paying attention. So we routinely like to note the need to be vigilant with cybersecurity, including town officials who have town email. That means you. I'm not looking at all of you, not just you.
What did I do?
You didn't really do anything, I don't think.
Oh, I
Yeah,
think
you're in the
I
line
did
of
something
sight.
wrong.
I did
No,
something wrong.
just, we've got to be careful, because a lot of email looks legit and it isn't. Nantucket Regional Transit Authority service modifications could have an impact on the general fund budget through the state assessment to the town. And while the state's pilot program for free public transit service throughout the state has been extended for another year at the state's expense, we don't know if our state assessment could eventually be impacted. PFAS costs remain a high concern and also largely unknown, but regulatory requirements are on the way from state and/or federal agencies, and this may necessitate significant capital and operating costs in the fairly near future. Additionally, some recent public well testing has shown levels of PFAS which, while extremely low, may require remediation and/or treatment, and the well is offline and has been offline since even before this testing occurred. The extent of this is not fully understood at this point. We are realizing increased maintenance and operational costs of our aging facilities. Space is at a premium, and many buildings are showing signs of wear and tear. Next slide, please. And these are just some next steps, not atypical from any other year. On January 7th, we have our annual public hearing, our annual visit to the school committee to present this budget to them. On January 8th is the board's annual public hearing on the budget, and hopefully at the end of that, you will endorse a recommended fiscal 26 general fund budget that we will then take to the finance committee, and they will meet from mid-January-ish to mid-March to review the budgets and other financial appropriations. Town meeting, as we know, Saturday, May 3rd. The annual town election is Tuesday, May 20th. So we want to quickly take you through a couple of other things. We want to show you what our OpenGov format is going to look like. Hopefully, next year we'll have this fully in place. It'll be, so our presentation next year will be a bit different. Brian, you want to take them through
so
this?
I really wanted to have this for you this year. Unfortunately, with some transition, it became really difficult to do. So this will be implemented for next year. It'll be a much more in-depth format for everybody with a lot more graphs and charts. Erica, can you just kind of scroll through? It does give us ability to build reports and graphs using our chart of accounts from OpenGov right in this report. Keep scrolling through. In the presentation, we had built some of these just so you could all see them, comparisons with notes underneath about town salaries, school salaries, notes about the graphs. Keep going, keep scrolling down. Pretty much be able to build reports like this that breaks down every category that we took you through in the PowerPoint. The goal is also to build these types of reports and graphs and charts also on the revenue side, and include a lot more information about statistical information in the town that I think would be really of interest and people would like to be able to see. Keep going, scrolling down. So this is really, go ahead.
Can you toggle a switch and have them show, percentage increase from year to year, that type of thing?
You can actually, we can't do it right now, but you'll be able to go to the data and it'll be able to do that. You can actually, when you're looking at it, you'll be able to change it to a line graph if you want, or a pie chart and things like that.
So it can show you what percentage increases over time, that type of thing. That's awesome.
So it's going to be a lot better. And I think it'll be more interactive. Like I said, the goal really was to have it this year, and I really wish that I could have done that. But we've already begun working on it for next year, so keep scrolling through. Keep going, yeah. And then we'll be able to build better charts in here for all of the, the expense increase requests, and we'll be able to build some better statistics in here for all of this. So this is kind of just one piece of the component that this platform is going to look like. One of the things that I really like about it is for all the expenses and the revenues, it's coming straight from our chart of accounts, which is being updated every month for actuals. So we'll be able to build reports with multi-years of actuals within this presentation for everyone to be able to see, which I think will be important, so.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Erica.
So Erica, now you can go to the budget message. So while we're pulling that up, the budget message has a, I'll just have you scroll through. It's got a table of contents, obviously, and then a letter of transmittal from the town manager to the board, giving an overview of the budget, some of the numbers, those sorts of things. And then we move into some details. We have an introduction about that's just more detailed about what is going to be contained and focused on. We list out challenges, and those have several categories. Continuity, what does that say? Oh, continuity of financial strengths. We are in a very financially strong position in the town of Nantucket, so we list out all the ways why. Caution, there are some cautionary messages, so we have included those. And then we have some graphs which break down the funding projections, revenue, and expenses. We explain in even more detail, it sort of goes from high level to more detailed of what the budget will contain and fund. Keep going, that's just all the expense increase recommendations, and this is how they're developed and what the criteria is and what the specific list of items is. Actually, these charts show what was actually submitted by the departments, and as well as what we've ended up with. So you can scroll through that at a later time, but it shows what was submitted. And then we have current and future year considerations to give people a heads up on some stuff, and then a conclusion, and then a ton of appendices that will all be online. I really want to thank Assistant Town Managers Rick Sears and Greg Tivnan, Finance Director Brian Turbot, and our new financial analyst, Stephen Hunter, who's sitting right there in the back. Stephen has really stepped up and helped us out in our transition from our prior person, Maria Basheva, who's now at the airport, and we really appreciated her as well. She did some pre-work on this. And also the department heads for their assistance with the process to develop the budget. And some of them might be a little disappointed, but they understand, and we appreciate their assistance. And we're happy to answer any questions, but also we do have, this is a lot to absorb, and you only got some of this after Friday. So as you're going through it, if you think of questions or whatever, this is on your agenda next week as a follow-up item.
Any questions at the moment, or we?
Yeah, I was looking for this. The expense requests not approved.
Yeah.
That's always like to ask people with budgets if we cut it 10%, what wouldn't you do?
We had a bit of a round of that. I don't know that we had a specific percentage number like that, but please maybe don't go asking your favorite department, if what they really want, and can you get it for them?
This is the improvement over the years is just incredible. And I can't imagine you ever thought you would be here.
No,
15 or 20 years ago.
Yes.
There was no way, and this is amazing.
Yeah, this is much better, and really, it's a team effort, and Brian's been instrumental, as has Rick and Greg. This really could not be done without them, and the board support is also very important, as well as the FinCom, so really thank you all for your support on this.
Go ahead, Tom.
Libby, the room's occupancy tax, since there really hasn't been, as you said, a standard year for short-term rentals and COVID, I think it's going to take some thinking, quite obviously, of how that's going to shake out in the next couple of years and what that revenue is going to come in and, full year. Brian, I don't know if you have any comments on this year or just general thoughts on it.
We're cautiously optimistic. The second, I think it is noted in the budget message that the town manager went through, but the second quarter will be received on December 30th or 31st, and that will, as I always mentioned to the board, the first quarter payment in September and the second quarter payment for that in December are generally the two largest payments and kind of what we rely on and what we think this full year. So we're cautiously optimistic that it's going to continue to hold, and we have had discussions about the impacts. So, but I think we still are kind of in that period where we're still not sure what it really is normal for that revenue source.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that the hotels themselves have grown so much even the last couple of years. Their percentage, was quite an increase. In the short-term rental stayed, went up a little bit, but the hotels went up a ton. I was
Prices
shocked.
rising.
Well, the prices are rising, and there's a couple more been added. Were renovated and added, but that was surprising to me.
Yeah, there's been a lot of capital investment in
Yeah.
some of the large hotels, and I think their rates are up
Yes.
significantly as a result. So it'll be interesting to see with the warrant articles on regulations. One proposes a cap of 1,350, and I mean, that's a game changer.
That would be.
So, yeah, it could be really damaging on the revenue side. So we have to,
Madam
some
Chair,
analytics on that.
if it's enforceable.
There's that, but if we think we have 2,000 and the voters cap it at 1,350, that's going to have a tremendous impact on the revenue side potentially. So I think having some analysis on that would be helpful for the voters when they're looking at that and what it might mean to services that the town provides. So just a thought. Thank you very much for all
Thank
the
you.
work that goes into this and for the clarity of the presentation. It's really helpful. Okay. Town-sponsored warrant articles.
Okay, so in your packet, and again, this got into a little bit late. The power outage, by the way, it did affect the town building on Sunday and Saturday. So what I have tried to do here is is on bold, indicate what has changed since we last reviewed this a couple weeks ago. So under general bylaws, continue down just a tad. Yeah, right there. Well, actually, I should mention, I didn't see it until today, but there is some information about e-bike regulations and/or bylaw, which I have not fully absorbed yet, but that will hopefully be in your packet for next week. The noise bylaw. So as you know, we've had some back and forth a little bit about this with the Wisconsin Civic Association and other groups. And they were advised to go to the Builders Association to review their proposal. And then you talked about it a little bit with the interested party on this from Wisconsin Civic Association. And there is attached to your packet some information that she provided, which indicates that she did go to the builders. And actually, you knew that, and she was subsequently advised to talk to some contractors specifically about whether or not it would impact them. And I forgot what you said about that, but it is in the packet. And there's a little chart in the packet as well on a summary of the proposed changes. So there's an email in your packet about this. I don't know if Carol came on. Was she able to come? Okay. Well, I guess I don't really want to totally represent this for her, and in case I say something wrong, but basically, she was asked to talk to some of the contractors, which she did, and one of her items in her email is the trades are not going to jump up and down and shout hooray at these proposals. However, I do believe this proposal is reasonable to both the tradespeople and residents of Nantucket, and one that will attempt to lessen the confusion of the noise bylaw, I guess. So I don't know, maybe look it over in some detail. Because just fast forwarding a tiny bit, you're scheduled currently to adopt the warrant on January 22nd, and there's a lot of work to do between now and then, and we are not meeting for a couple of weeks, so we're going to be at work developing a draft warrant. John and I need to do some work on it, as well as some others, but we're going to have to make some decisions pretty soon. So that's the noise
Yeah,
bylaw.
on the noise bylaw, the thing that really appeals to me is the consistency, making it more consistent and less this rule here and that rule there. That has some real appeal to me, whether the hours are exactly right yet or not. But I do like the idea of having it simpler.
Madam Chair, I guess my point would be, do we have the bandwidth for this, and what might they consider doing it, putting it on the special instead?
I don't want to speak for them, but I'm sure they would be okay with that.
And then the question is, I think about what is the process to get input from NPEDC and from, department heads, et cetera. What other input, what analysis or input needs to be done, because if we just decide it's the best thing ever, we're going to, very quickly, we're going to be told how dumb we were and we didn't think of this and that, and what were you thinking about? And so, I think we should be including as many people as possible at some point. I know we don't have time to do that before this town meeting. Maybe the fall would allow something like that, so that if we do it, it's united in some manner, I think would be a better tack to try to take.
So the town departments that would be involved in the noise bylaw, which specifically would probably be police, have looked at this and I don't think have any particular concerns.
Yeah, it might be worth getting it on an NPEDC agenda. I can ask that happen as well.
Okay, we'll send it around to maybe a wider group. Maybe we'll include the health department and anybody else I can think of town agencies. Okay, rental car bylaw changes. That's not a highlighted item right now. However, I did have a meeting this afternoon with the chief and the licensing administrator and Attorney Riley from Town Council's office, and we were going over some potential amendments to the existing car rental bylaw that would address the issues that have been brought up, including things like how do we deal with surplus rental vehicle medallions? How does a rental agency get surplus rental vehicle medallions and things of that nature? So we're working through it, and I don't know if we're going to, I think we agreed, we're not going to have an actual article for you to look at for next week, but I think at your first meeting in January, we will. Okay, traffic calming signage exemption. There is a draft bylaw that the transportation program manager developed. It's been reviewed by town council, and it basically would amend the town bylaw to allow the traffic control devices using LED or other lights in a speed feedback sign, it would be that type of sign only, it would allow that on town roads, that those are prohibited right now. And I think they've been actually requested by a variety of neighborhoods. So, but we haven't been able to do it because the bylaw does not allow for it. So that is something to consider. There's a wetlands bylaw cleanup that is in the packet. It's not a lot of things, but there are some cleanup, there's a little bit of cleanup language because of the new Concom wetlands regulations. So that's to be reviewed. Home rule petitions, nothing new here other than the last one, Coastal Resiliency District establishment. That was a home rule petition already at the 2024 annual town meeting. It was tabled indefinitely. And the recommendation is to resubmit it with the same language from last year's town meeting. So if we want to have some discussion about this, we can get Town Council, Vicky Marsh, and the Sustainable Programs Manager, Mr. Murphy, on if you want to hear more about it. But this has been something that's been consistently worked on by the coastal resiliency staff for a few months now.
Yeah, and I think it has to come with some community outreach and explanation, because there was a lot of confusion at last town meeting that may have led to its failure as to what it really means.
Yeah, so maybe we need to work up a little fact sheet. Okay, Mass General Law acceptances, good landlord tax exemption opt-in. That was supposed, was
Libby,
that?
may I interrupt real quick?
Yeah, go
I have
ahead.
a quick question on the home rule petitions.
Yep.
The Somerset bike path, that is no longer needed, correct?
Somerset Bike Path, as we had initially been discussing it, was not going to be needed because it wasn't going to be able to be approved.
Right.
Because of Article 97 issues. But I think what you might be saying is, we don't need it because I think we're going to redesign that section of the bike path, yes.
That's what I meant, thank you.
Yep. So the good landlord tax exemption opt-in, did you discuss that tonight? I already forgot, under the housing items.
Yeah, basically what it does is it allows the town to authorize, to give the residential exemption to landlords who rent year-round.
Yep, so that's in,
Yeah.
right? We're
It
gonna,
makes the property eligible for the residential exemption, yeah.
okay.
I think we have to opt in, and then we can decide whether to actually put it in place in a program, right, Tom? Oh, Christie.
Thank you. This will be on your agenda next week to review the recommendations from the trust.
Thank you,
Great,
Christie. Sorry,
thanks.
I forgot about that. And the seasonal community designation opt-in, there's been some, we've had some back and forth, Christie, about this, about whether or not we need it. And did we land it on we don't need it?
We will know more by the end of this week, hopefully.
Okay. All right, so more on that next week anyway. Okay, and I think that might be it for updates on the warrant.
I have a quick question on 7 Amelia Drive, long-term lease. What is the thinking on that? That's the property that the cut-through is next to, right?
Yeah, the thinking on that is that the town owns that property.
Right.
And in order to lease it to the Affordable Housing Trust, we need authorization, which we don't have yet.
It's part of the RFP process for that, right, Christie? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Great, all right.
Okay.
Any questions, or anything
I
else?
just hope it has a big municipal preference on it, because if we're going to do it, if possible, so.
Well, it's going to be 3 units, 2 or 3 units of housing on that particular spot. Okay. All right, moving on to select board reports and comments. We're not doing number 1, as I indicated at the beginning of the meeting. Number 2 is an unsurprising announcement that we submitted the letter to BOEM that was in our packet last week, and we got an nearly immediate response. Thank you for your response, but no. So it is moving along through the permitting process. South Coast is moving along through the permitting process as expected. Next steps here will be, we have to wait for the issuance of the permit, which is expected in about 10 days, 9 days, and then we decide how to proceed with an appeal or therefore. So that's how it proceeds. So unsurprisingly, but we have put our stake in the ground that gives us something to appeal about. So, any other committee reports?
Just one thing just struck me earlier tonight was that we've done so really well with the housing. And I think it was, looking back at how it's been done, I think it was having a person and now more people dedicated to that and responsible for that and coming here and reporting on a regular basis. And I think as a, you know, as an example of how we need to do maybe some of the other things, it's a good example of success. You know, there weren't 3 owners, there's 1 owner. And so I think that, you know, we should be, anyway, it was something that struck me when we were talking about it today earlier.
Okay. Any other committee reports? Okay, to our favorite part of the meeting.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thanks, everyone out there, for listening and paying attention to all our work. Have a good evening.